Good day, everybody. Where have we seen this before, eh? That's right, we're making another suit. I'm very thrilled to be cracking on with this project at last. There's always a sort of post-project honeymoon period where I kind of reflect with relative satisfaction on the job. If not well done outright, then better done than the previous one. But I pretty quickly transitioned, in this case, to relative dissatisfaction, actually, with the wedding suit that I've made. Regardless, I was always gonna get on and make another suit soon, so here I am. And yeah, it's about to be summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, so I thought, why not get going on a nice little linen suit that I will wear for, well, who knows what occasion. But you know, never hurts to have these things around, and most importantly, it's going to be a lot of fun to make. So the wedding suit series was basically a tutorial series, wasn't it? And I don't think it's really necessary for me to repeat that and basically show every step and explain what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and so on. If you do want or need a tutorial on how to make a full suit, then you can find that video here. But for today and for, you know, I guess the few videos that could come out of this, because obviously it's going to take a little while to make this bad boy, I'm just going to probably let it hang out a bit and work through at my own pace, not necessarily show everything I'm doing, although try and focus in on anything I'm doing that maybe is different from the last time, or anything that I feel like I just, you know, have more to say about than maybe I gave myself time to do first time around. Anyway, yeah, as you can see, this is a, well, I say as you can see, maybe you can't see. This is a brown linen, a nice chocolate brown linen, which I'm extremely fond of. And yeah, the pattern I'm using is just the same pattern as for the last suit, obviously. You know, it's my big hope to kind of nail down this pattern as a template for all of my future suit projects. I've made a few tweaks, just tapering things in, you know, tightening up the fit, and also just slightly change the shape of the front of the jacket. But otherwise, it's more or less as it was. We're basically running it back. So starting off just sewing the darts, as ever. Yeah, I'm often forgetting that with the darts, you're kind of meant to, rather than backstitching with the machine, leave the threads loose and tailing so that you can tie them off like this. It's just a little bit less intrusive on the dart itself in terms of the volume. And yeah, and then I'm also actually like snipping the dart open down the middle so that I can actually press it flat. And having added a bit of depth and volume into the dart actually makes it a little bit easier to do than it was previously, because I had quite a shallow dart on the last jacket. You know, that was more like, I don't know, I think 1.5 centimeters, and I think I've upped it to 2. So yeah, small margins, but it all makes a difference. Yeah, and then I'm gonna press these, but I'm also gonna have a little experiment with iron working, which I'm gonna do off camera in case it's absolutely worthless. And it's my first time really properly trying it, so there's also no point pretending that I'm gonna offer any kind of tutorial on it. All right, so I've pressed it. I've tried a little bit to do some funky ironworking stuff. I don't really know if it's worked. I think it's worked a little bit. Obviously, a lot of this volume is coming from the dart itself and the way that's distorting the shape of the panel. But the idea was I tried to reduce some of the volume that it creates at the bottom of the dart here by sort of, you know, using lots of steam, holding the iron down on it, lots of steam again, circles of reducing circumference, things like that. Again, I'm not really sure I've achieved much here. You know, linen should be amenable to this, or rather the linen cotton blend that this is. So that's 82% linen, 18% cotton. But yeah, I mean, I think something's kind of happened. Yeah, and then just stretching it around the side seam there, a little bit sort of between the waist and the top of the sleeve, taking a bit of that stretch back out of the front of the armhole just to kind of get that back to how it should be. And then just stretching it out through the chest area. So trying to generate this sort of fullness here that you see, and a little bit up into the shoulder as well. And yeah, as far as stretching is concerned, the method is sort of holding the iron down, using lots of steam. And you know, if you imagine I've got the iron here, and I'm basically pulling while holding down with the iron and pulling away in sort of X-like shape with the iron, and all the time pulling the fabric away from where the iron is. Again, this is my first time trying this out, so I'm not trying to be especially informative on this particular point. I'm sure there are some of you watching who do know what I'm trying to talk about here, and either will be able to therefore appreciate the either successful or unsuccessful effort that I've made to do this. Just you know, just trying to keep you abreast of what is going on. So I'm getting on with the welt pocket, as you can possibly tell. So yeah, I've kind of played it by ear with the placement of this. I've kind of tried to make it so that it's roughly level with where the armhole seam is going to meet the side seam armhole seam, and so that when this is actually folded up, so this is the line on which I'm actually going to sew it to the front panel, it will then be a little bit above that, so more like level with the armhole notch there. Yeah, so I just need to get on and put these little pieces together. It's a very fiddly construction this, but actually quite straightforward once you sort of get the hang of it. As long as you do get the hang of it. Yeah, I had toyed with maybe doing a patch pocket for the breast pocket as well, as I'm going to do with the hip pockets in a minute, but I think I just thought it's a little bit more niche even than patch hip pockets, so I figured let's just keep it simple, keep it classic. And in any case, I think I'd only really successfully made well, don't know if I've truly successfully made a single welt pocket in my time. I'm trying to make sure I don't get too ahead of myself with trying new fancy things before I've really gotten to grips with the sort of, the standard features like, breast welt pockets. That said, I still feel like I'm similarly dissatisfied with my jetted pocket efforts so far, and I am throwing those out the window for this jacket, like I said, in favour of hip patch pockets, because, they're just calling to me. Yoink. Yeah, see, I've already mucked up by sewing both pieces of pocketing to this handsome individual. I also really find getting the angles lined up with these things a little bit confusing. So the idea is, just to clarify what I mean, is that, you have these slanted pieces, slanted pocketing pieces and a slanted welt piece itself. And the idea is that once it all turns out and the welt is sat at the angle it's going to be at on the jacket, that the pocket bag will be hanging down straight. And yeah, the first time I did it, I got it wrong, so that it was like the reverse and that there was this very dramatic slant to the pocket bag, which is not the end of the world really, because I don't know whoever actually uses these pockets except for little things like, what are they called, chest squares. And I'm not quite that foppish just yet, but anyway, boo-hoo, it's difficult. Stern words to myself there. Anyway, I'm a very careless unpicker incidentally, as you probably can tell. All right, that should be fixed. Yeah, I finally got myself some fancy proper basting thread. Clear stelle, as I believe they say in the mother country. As in all the gear, no idea pursuits, I can't imagine it's going to make any significant differences to the quality of what I make with it, but one can dream. Oh, I had such a breakdown yesterday trying to cut this all out with my shears. I think they'd achieved levels of bluntness that, even by their standards, were frankly unforgivable. Not that it's their fault, obviously. Ooh. Yeah, I'd be curious to know everyone's preferred method of shear sharpening. I have a whetstone that I got from a gardening centre, which, does work. I'm sure I'm just doing something wrong, or not doing it enough. But anyway, I feel like it all made way more sense in my head last time. Truly, one of the reasons I am most thrilled to get back to sewing suits is all the basting I get to do. This was obviously one of my most exhausting refrains first time around. But I've missed it so much. And again, I got myself that nice thread. I was wondering when I'm actually going to get a chance to roll out this bad boy. And here we are. Let's do the old switcheroo. Oh yeah, happy days. When you're watching sort of like ASMR style, Instagrammable tailoring content, there's something about the fully basted final jacket before all the basting is taken out that, if anything, is somehow more delightful than the completed garment. There's one thing I was disappointed about the last one is that the basting itself, this purely structural, construction-oriented stitching was kind of a little bit messy. I want to get to that point where I'm just about to take all the basting out and I'm looking at it and being like, you know what, I almost don't want to. So maybe this will be the time, although these mark stitches are already kind of spoiling the show. Who cares? Not really important, not really what it's about. And yet. Ooh. Oh, come on. Yoink. Yeah, I don't know what your approaches are to the whole when to change your needle question, but I'm very much a leave it in till it breaks kind of guy, and guess what just happened? Oops. Oh, come on. There you go. Yeah, so you can see now that is going to then fold up like that way, and the pocket bag, when it falls down, will be correctly perpendicular. Yeah, not looking too bad. I'll take it. I'd be curious to know from any sort of more seasoned sewists / tailors than myself, if there ever comes a point where you're not absolutely nerve-wracked by the whole snipping open the welt pocket, pipe pocket, triangular prong situation, because I don't know how many times I've done it, but still takes my breath away, and not in a good way. See, I've missed making that noise. I feel like I haven't really been doing that in the more recent videos. I'm sure you all feel the same. I really should probably be looking a bit more carefully at what I'm doing. Because just the cruelest thing about this is you think, okay, I've gone about as close as I think is safe to go to snip. And then when you try and turn it out, it's like, no, you need to go way closer than that. Alrighty, that should be that, for better or worse. Let's see. All right then, well, after several rounds of trying to get nearer to that seam, I think I've just about got an acceptable result, so on we go. And of course, any excuse to do some cross-stitching, I will take it. I think this welt is coming out okay. I think also I might already do the old, the buttonhole twist finishing stitches like, the bar tack. I think probably I'm only going to get around to doing the pockets today. Like I say, just kind of want to hang out, do some sewing, get started on this project. Maybe, listen to some jazz, or at least you guys will listen to some jazz. I'm not piping it in as we speak. That said, I've always got jazz playing in my head. Oh no. Yep, I went for it. Here we are, bar tacking with my beautiful, Sita Solo Reale silk buttonhole twist. Love this stuff. I'm enjoying this sort of freewheeling approach. I certainly enjoyed the last series as well, but it was rather, formulaic. I've no idea if this is actually remotely entertaining to watch, but I think I'd probably watch it, so. I'm always terrible at matching the angles of these bar tacks. I say always terrible, this is literally the second time I've ever done this, so. Yep, I'm pretty pleased with how this welt's turned out. And yeah, I think we'll get on with the patch pockets in the afternoon. And then maybe, if I have time, maybe I will do all the prick stitching. Because it's just nice to look at, on the work in progress already. Alrighty, lunchtime. And now she blows. Handsome lady, I'd say. Okay, so I've sewn my side seams as well now, and I think the stretching that I'd done on the front panel had sort of discombobulated me a little bit, and I had to remember to match it on the side panel as well. So that's all done. Let's move on to the patch pockets, and obviously since, I am basically doing this for the first time again, I might as well sort of do a walkthrough of what I'm doing. I don't think it's especially long-winded or complicated, so get on with that. So yeah, this is a pretty much free-handed patch pocket pattern shaped thing situation. You can, just really design whichever shape you'd like, but the dimensions are, I think, about 23 centimeters top to bottom length plus an inch, which is to say 2.5 centimeters of folding over flap E-bit allowance at the top. And then it's 15 centimeters wide, or 6 inches, plus again, another 0.5 centimeter or 0.5 millimeters. I don't know what that is in inches, you're gonna have to deal with it, around all the other edges there. And yeah, I've got a bit of fusible interfacing on the wrong side or inside of the patch. That is just leaving this sort of 0.5 centimeter fringe around the edges. And then what I've got here, in my case, is pocketing, because I haven't got lining fabric yet. I don't really know what I want to go for. I think I'll go for a lightweight cotton. I guess it's more about what color to match this one. If you have any thoughts or wishes or suggestions, please feel free to make them in the comments. But anyway, yeah, you would ideally use lining to do this, to sort of make the inside of the flat pocket. Again, in my case, I've just got pocketing. So yeah, starting off, again, we've got this 2.5 centimeter or 1 inch flap allowance at the top there. On my pocket piece, which is the same dimensions as the actual patch pocket piece, just an extra 0.5 centimeters all around, I have folded down towards the inside just a 1.5 centimeter fringe there at the flap as well. And I'm going to lay this on top of its corresponding pocket piece. So I've got to be careful in my case because these aren't actually symmetrical. So they are sort of unique to their particular matching pocket, if that makes sense, as far as left or right pocket is concerned. I'm going to lay this so that this folded edge is just below where the sort of 2.5 centimeter, 1 inch fold is going to be. And then I'm going to baste it, wherever my basting thread has gone. So this is my fancy basting thread. And then this is designed for real live action tailoring, which means it can do this, which is quite fun. What about that, eh? So yeah, off we go. And having positioned this, I'm just going to baste it sort of relatively roughly just around the inside so that these pieces are kind of attached together. Yeah, I've just realized I ripped off the bit that had the knot on there, so that wasn't very clever. Well, that didn't take long, did it? I've sewed it to the wrong side, so at least I can do this, I suppose. Oh, can't even do that. Is there anything left to take away from me other than my dignity? So then I suppose that belongs with the other piece, and this is what I'm after. Let's try this again, shall we? That's more like it. So now, just from the other side, I'm going to trim this to be flush with the actual garment fabric patch that I got with the world's bluntest fabric shears, making one last honorary appearance before hopefully I can sharpen them for good. I really honestly think I need about half an hour on the whetstone with these bad boys because, well, they speak for themselves, don't they? You can hear that. Oh no. This is literally the thinnest cotton pocketing known to man. And you think I was trying to get through raw denim or something. Alrighty. So what I'm now doing is, from the fusible side, basting again around the very edge of this whole concoction, really so within this sort of 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. But as I'm doing so, I'm kind of pulling the actual garment fabric fused patch inwards so that it's creating almost this little bubbly effect in the middle against the sort of tighter backdrop of the lining itself. Not the lining, sorry, of the lining or the pocketing in my case. And the reason for doing this is as follows. You can imagine in a second, I'm going to properly machine stitch around this edge and attach these pieces together, and then I'm going to turn them inside out. And if I were to not do something akin to what I'm doing now, these two pieces, so the lining / pocketing and then the garment fabric, would be basically of identical sizes. And what I actually want is for the lining / pocketing bit to be smaller, to be sort of tauter, so that it's kind of pulling itself inwards. And what that's going to mean is that when I've sewn this pocket, this patch pocket, to the outside of the jacket itself, there's not going to be any sign of the pocketing / lining showing through from underneath that. It might be a bit clearer what I mean if it isn't already, once I actually do attach to the front panel. But yeah, this is quite an essential step because I have made a sort of patch pocket in this manner before for a breast pocket on this sort of sports coat that I made with this Japanese yarn-dyed cotton. And I didn't really think about this aspect of it, and you can kind of see the pocketing side of the pocket showing through to the outside where it's been sewn onto the outside of the jacket, which isn't ideal. And yeah, this is just a very elegant way to avoid that. So yeah, just a slightly clearer example of what I mean. So I'm just kind of pulling that in, showing just basically a couple of millimeters, 2-3 millimeters of the lining underneath it. So nothing too drastic, just enough to be confident that when I turn this inside out, this garment fabric piece is going to want to basically wrap around the lining / pocketing piece that it's attached to. Oh, this basting thread is so much smoother to use. I didn't think the basting experience could get any sweeter. And yet, holy moly, all right then. Yeah, so fine margins, but again, just once again trimmed that pocketing to match the edge of the garment piece itself. So just before I do sew around the actual edges for good, I'm just going to fold down this 1 inch allowance basically, and just sort of within the seam allowance on the sides, I'm just going to do a couple of basting stitches to hold this in place. Or I will if I remember to tie a knot. But let's just do it this way. Ah, for goodness sake. Not quite the muscle man that I thought I was, am I? All right then, so it's now time to sew this around the edges, and I'm going to do so from the lining / pocketing side, just to make sure nothing slips around unduly. Yeah, and just so that's my, what was it, 1/2 centimetre seam allowance all the way around, making sure to be nice and firm back stitching at the tops there. And yeah, then we'll be ready to turn this bad boy inside out. Alrighty then, so just snip these corners, yoink, and get rid of all my basting, which I no longer need. Ugh. Yeah, I'm not going to attempt any more Schwarzeneggerian yanks, if that's a way to put it. Okie dokie, moment of truth. Okay, yeah, it's kind of working out. What's going on there? Oh, interesting. Did I forget to take out some basting? No, it's just like that, is it? Okay, I'll try not to worry too much about it then. So just before I go and press it, I'm just basting again to sort of pull out the seam so it's not sort of tucked into itself, and make sure that the edge of this is very much the edge of the seam itself, and while doing so, just helping again massage the lining side around to the inside. So you can kind of see here that there's a little bit of a tension in the lining side and the pocketing side that's kind of pulling itself inwards, and I just want to baste it in place before I press it to kind of ensure that that's the position that I'm locking in before I then go and attach it. So around here I can just see the very, very finest sort of fringe of garment fabric poking round, which is how I want it to be. And this is just going to help ensure that that's what I'm going to achieve. So I think in this specific case, I've actually done a pretty bad job, but we'll see. It's wonderfully satisfying. Although I'm noticing that this pocket shape is kind of too small for my hands. I have sort of, I suppose, rather big hands. Don't know if I'm ever going to be doing much sort of lounging around with my hands stuffed in my pockets, leaning against sort of Renaissance pillars or something like that. While looking extremely cool, I think instead I'm going to be sticking my middle finger in there, wondering how on earth I'm going to get the loose change that I've hidden away at the bottom with such oafish hands as these. That's enough of that. Let's go press this. Sweet, so that's now been pressed. And just here, so I have these folded edges together with the lining / pocketing just beneath. It's not very straight here, it's not very neat, and I think it's kind of supposed to be a bit further down, but whatever. It's fine as it is, as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to use my buttonhole twist again and just sort of finish this on the inside with a nice little prick stitch, because I'm fancy. So again, this is the twist. Oh, bother. This is the twist that has been run through tailor's wax, beeswax, and then pressed between a piece of paper just to fix the shape into the thread. No one's going to see this obviously, but it'll be nice to know it's there, won't it? Maybe I'll do a relatively generous stitch so I don't get too bogged down in this. Really, I'm getting nearer and nearer to the position of never using the machine again. I'm very fond of my machine, it does a very good job, but I do get annoyed with it sort of clogging up the desk space here sometimes. I guess I'm just too lazy to lug it up and down every hour when I need to sew one seam. It's my fault, not its. Okay then, so there we go. That's sort of that beautiful little pick stitch on the inside, and I haven't gone around to the outside, I've just sort of picked up the inside of the underfolded flap there. This is now ready to be attached to the garment. So I'm just placing this pocket basically between the side seam and the end of the dart. So I'm getting a piece of pocketing again to put on the wrong side as reinforcement, so just large enough to cover more than the size of the top of the pocket basically. So it's gonna kind of, obviously on the right side, gonna be in this sort of position, more or less. So I'm just basing this piece of pocketing on the wrong side as, you guessed it, reinforcement. I say you guessed it, I said it literally, 10 seconds ago. So no brownie points for you, I'm afraid. I'm not sure if this is pocketing actually. I think this might even be rather the lining fabric that I used for my aforementioned Japanese yarn-dyed sports coat / blazer. Basically the same kind of fabric, sort of thin cotton or polyester, don't remember which. Who cares? It's all the same to me. Yeah, once again, the world is ending outside, so please forgive the gloominess of the image. Gotta say, I'm finding this sort of storminess quite nostalgic actually. I remember when I was doing the wedding suit series and it was kind of winter, the fabric I was using was just blacker than black, it didn't reflect any light, and from a photographic standpoint, I used to really struggle because I shoot basically using the natural light coming through these windows, getting enough juice basically on my camera to get a sort of usable image. And I found then, I remember hoping, oh God, I can't wait till summer, spring comes and I can just rely on reliable natural light basically. Only now I've got it and I'm enjoying this sort of dark little phase. It's quite nice, this sort of cozy little lamplit, wintry, dare I say, atmosphere that it's creating. At least so I find. Happy days, good times, all that jazz. Right, so that's basted in place. I'm just going to turn back to the wrong side now and properly attach this where it needs to be attached. And if you remember, I know I haven't demonstrated it today in this video, but if you recall from making the welt pocket, you then kind of just cross stitch the pocket from the wrong side on the underside. And I'm basically going to do that here as well, cross stitching the top bits just for extra security, and then just a sort of more normal diagonal stitch around the length of the rest of the pocket. And I'm just using sort of the standard sewing thread here, so the garment coloured thread. I don't have any silk finishing thread in this colour. If I did, then I would probably use that. But it's all good, and to be honest, I could probably use basting thread here as well because this is all going to be covered on the inside by the canvas, so there's not really a premium on attractiveness / presentability in this context. What on earth am I talking about? Yeah, so I've cross-stitched there in that sort of pocketing zone at the very top of the pocket, and now I'm really just doing this kind of diagonal stitch. So obviously not showing through to the full outer side of the pocket on the right side, just sort of picking up all the layers between here and that one. And yeah, and really trying to be relatively firm. I've just looked on the other side, and I've got to say I've not done the best job in the whole having the lining / pocketing side of the pocket be shorter / tenser than the outside, because I can see a little bit of the pocketing poking through. Maybe I can also fix that with the prick stitch that I'm going to do in a second. You live and learn, but in theory, that's kind of the way it goes. So going back to my waxed buttonhole twist, I'm just going to add some, similarly to the welt pocket, just some of these diagonal bar tacks at the top. More decorative than structural, but I also hope slightly structural too. And yeah, as I said, I'm not entirely satisfied with the whole garment fabric being turned out to the outside here, but I think it's worked moderately well. And yeah, just I think if you're doing this yourself at home, make sure that when you're working in, easing in the garment fabric underneath the lining to sort of create those few millimeters of excess that you then trim away in order to generate that effect, really just make sure it's a good 3 millimeters or so. And then when it turns around to the inside, turns around to the right side, hopefully all should be as intended. I'm also going to prick stitch it after this, and I think that then will conclude the day's action. It's been good. It's been good getting back to this nonsense. Do it all day, all week, all month, all year, pretty much forever, indefinitely. Yeah, so I'm just trying to prick stitch very close to the edge here in my case. You could do a bit further in if you fancied, or indeed you could do multiple rows I understand that the more pick stitching there is, the more casual the effect. But, you know, I'm not really worried about it either way in this instance. But yeah, I'm just gonna do it here around the edge to kind of efface it, I suppose, you know, sort of increase its subtlety, you know, make it a little bit less eye-catching, but just eye-catching enough, while also securing the edge of the pocket itself to the garment, which I think will make for a more secure pocket either way. Although again, you wouldn't really want to be relying on this as a structurally significant stitch. But obviously, in addition to all the other stitching we've done, you know, that diagonal stitching on the other side and the cross stitching at the top, it's certainly not hurting having this as an extra reinforcement. It's a happy day here in No Stitch Unpicked Hours. This is really truly one of my favourite steps of the entire construction process. Tons and tons of hidden structural hand stitches, culminating, of course, in the marathon of lapel pad stitching. And this is going to go like that. The canvas is really one of the most essential and maybe definitive aspects of a tailored jacket. It's the thing that gives the jacket its structure, the front of the jacket its body, helps it maintain its form and indeed develop its form around the body of the wearer. As far as the construction itself is concerned, as far as the process, there are a few parts of it that are more rapturously fun than this. As with last week, if you do actually need or after a kind of step-by-step video on how to make these and how to put them together, you can find that here. Today though, we're vibe hunting. We're looking to have some fun. We're looking to chill out. How did I do this last time? Maybe I need to go and watch my own video. Yeah, so the idea of what I'm doing here is, you can see there's this sort of a wedge that's been cut out in the construction of the canvas, and what's going to happen is that's going to get closed under these strips of pocketing, and that's just going to generate a bit of volume in here around the chest area of the canvas to match basically the volume that's been put into the garment panel itself with both the dart and some ironworking that I've done. We're making it work. Ooh. And now I just need to zigzag all this. I'm going to do it with the machine. I did it by hand last time, but I posted a picture of it on Reddit, and people were rather amused by the messiness of it. So let's keep it real. Let's do it by the book. A little bit Frankenstein-esque, but that's what I like about it. I think it's worked out tolerably. Yeah, you can see that little volume there just coming up through the chest, thanks to this suppression. And also, yeah, this little wedge here, which is opening out the shoulder and, yeah, creating a similar effect. Again, just to match what's happened on the garment fabric itself. So, time to make the old plastron. And I really do love that word. Right when I thought I was done with the machine, not quite. Got another dart to close. Again, that's just the same effect really as here, just trying to generate a little bit of volume. That's not really worked, has it? Let's just do this by hand. Yeah, this fabric is a mixture of, I think, well, in this case, it's horsehair, some viscose wool, bit of cotton. And again, its job is to provide a certain structure over the chest to kind of hold up that fullness and generally stop the jacket from collapsing. But the fibers are relatively thick, and so it frays relatively easily, and because my machine's zigzag setting only goes so wide, it just can't really span to hold these two edges together without basically getting lost in the fray. So I'm just going to do it by hand. See, what am I always saying about hand stitches coming to your aid if in doubt? I don't know what to say, guys. I'm sorry you had to see this. I'm pleased to report that there's some progress that's been made with the sharpening of these shears. So as far as how I'm actually constructing my canvas, there are a couple of things that I'm doing slightly different this time than the last time. And the first, I think, is a real bit of a rogue move on my part. It was inspired by a video I'd seen on Kirby Allison's channel where he's talking with tailor Stephen Hitchcock, who's explaining about cutting the canvas slightly on the bias so that it has a little bit more give and it kind of absorbs the shape of the wearer a little bit better over time. I think I just thought, oh, it'd be kind of interesting to give that a try. And obviously the suit itself is linen. It's a fabric that is prone anyway to this sort of misshapenness, if you like. It's kind of baked into the aesthetic. And I don't know really, I mean, obviously I'm an idiot, but I just thought, whatever, let's just give it a go, see what happens. And yeah, in the interest also of this being a lighter garment, I'm not doing the full plastron setup that I did in my wedding suit, for instance, where there was also going to be this collar linen here at the top, just to kind of really reinforce that front of the shoulder area. I'm just doing the horsehair, and then what I have here is a piece of actually the flannel that I made those trousers out of to guard the body of the wearer, in this case myself, against the prickliness of this horsehair fabric. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear actually from anyone who has either experience with or knowledge regarding the whole cutting the canvas on the bias situation. This is just something that I've heard from an actual expert, and then I've just decided rather summarily to try it myself. Very inadvisable. I have no idea what I'm doing, especially. I don't even know if I would be able to recognize the differences between having done it this way and having not done it this way. I don't even know if the overall quality of the things I'm making remotely merits this kind of a niche decision making, given the fact that I'm probably massively underperforming in other foundational parts of the construction. Because it did sound like a very interesting idea, and I've seen in other sources sort of emphasizing the importance of getting the grain line of the canvas to exactly match that of the garment panels, which, to my mind makes sense, as far as the drape is concerned and the way everything falls and hangs around the body. But yeah, obviously, There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say so charmingly. If you know, let me know. Just realised I've trapped my poor pins underneath there. I'm not really sure how to get them out, actually. Oh, good Lord. It's like Apollo 13, this. Gonna have a ticker tape parade for these boys and bring them home. There we go. Yeah, I mean, similarly, my decision to leave out the collar linen, also vaguely inspired again by just remarks in this video that Hitchcock makes about, you know, trying to keep the padding light, purely a matter of style and house style and whatnot. I think I just thought, again, with it being a lighter thing, leave out that collar linen. But I also don't know if actually I'm abandoning what is really quite an essential structural element. Although I think from my earlier jacket, the one that I made out of that Japanese fabric, where there was no such thing, and you know, the effect isn't that marked, so we'll see. Anyway, God bless those pins. We brought them home. We are literally minutes away from the first round of pad stitching of this jacket, which is honestly always a special occasion, always a special day. I really need to start having these things commemorated with like national holidays. It's not like I'm at work now, am I? So this is really what I mean. I remember when I first made my first suit and didn't do any of this canvassing. I just interfaced it because that was what the instructions in the pattern said to do. And it, you know, worked out fine. It was a relatively heavy fabric anyway. All was well and good. And I remember watching things about, you know, how to do this, or the idea that this was actually how you built out the inside of a suit jacket, and thinking, oh my goodness, that sounds so laborious. And again, I got my classic tailoring techniques in menswear, and I was reading through it, and I was like, come on, like surely I'm never gonna get around to doing all that stuff. And as soon as you start doing it this way, you just absolutely fall in love with it. It's like, it's nothing I want to do more. I'm sure there are some things I want to do more, but you know, nothing springs to mind right now. It's pad stitching time. And so it begins. Yeah, a few things to say here. And firstly, I'm very grateful to some knowledgeable and eagle-eyed viewers of the earlier Wedding Suit series who advised me to, when doing this, have the canvas resting on a sort of rounded surface of some form that is going to better resemble, you know, the actual shape of the body this is eventually going to fit onto than just a flat surface, because again, you're just helping reinforce this slightly curved shape that's been achieved with the darts and whatnot. I have a cushion here, it'll do. I guess ideally I'd have some sort of larger ham, but I don't have that. Let's do it this way. And yeah, the second thing is I'm taking slightly more generous stitches than I did last time, just realizing I'm basically just entirely ripped off everything that Stephen Hitchcock said in this video. Again, he knows what he's doing. I don't. I'm just following my nose. But where he said that they actually also pad stitch their plastrons, their chests relatively generously, and he showed an example, and it really was just like, you know, even larger stitches than this. And that too, according to him, was designed to allow even greater flexibility in the canvas, in the plastron, in the chest area, just with the end of creating an even more malleable canvas, an even more malleable panel ultimately in the jacket itself that will then mold itself onto the body of the wearer. Again, he knows what he's talking about. I don't. It's so pretty, isn't it? If you happen to want a tutorial on how to do this stitch, you can find that here. It's also just a really sweet feeling when you actually attach the canvas then to the jacket panels, because you can really instantly feel the added life that it gives the jacket, and it truly becomes more recognizable as something that you're actually eventually going to wear and something that relates to things that you've worn in the past. It really is a shame that eventually you have to do such unpleasant things like setting sleeves. I just have this sort of traumatic relationship with setting sleeves, which I hope to overcome with this jacket, but we'll see. Yeah, there's just some comically uneven stitching here. Who knows? Who cares? Is it going to matter? How would I know? Oops. All right, let's take that hint there. I'm a little apprehensive it's going to turn out that I've sewed this to the cushion at several points and the whole house of cards is going to come falling down. But let's see, eh? Job done. What does pretty reliably confuse me with the construction of these canvases is the right side versus wrong side distinction. The wrong side is the side that ends up facing the body. So you have basically the wrong side of the garment panel on top of the right side of the canvas panel, the wrong side of the canvas panel on top of the wrong side then of the lining that will eventually cover it. I thought here that I was doing the canvas for the left panel of the jacket, you know, the one with the welt pocket and whatnot, but I've realized that actually no, this is the one for the right, which doesn't really, you know, make a difference to anything. Obviously, I need to do both of them at some point. Just goes to show, you know, best laid plans. All right then. Not bad. Now, when we're talking about nerve-wracking elements of the construction, this is also one of them, because in connecting the canvas to the actual garment panels themselves, you really do need to have everything lined up as exactly as possible, which is to say, exactly. Otherwise, there's going to be all sorts of funny wrinkles and ripples, and nothing is really going to fit or hang quite as it should. Although again, perhaps I've already negated all of that with my random, impulsive cutting the canvas on the bias decision. Oh, bother, I'm going to want to do it this way around, aren't I? Let's start again. There's definitely a sense of, you know, a lapse of concentration now really does doom the jacket somewhat. So I guess I'll just concentrate, won't I? Stop talking to you guys. All right, here goes nothing. Both the garment panel and the canvas have these different elements of volume that have been added. And obviously the idea is that these are all meant to correspond to each other. So what's done to the garment panel gets done in some form to the canvas, but obviously they're also different as well, and different things have been done to achieve the same or complementary effects, so it's a little bit tough to feel as though you're doing it right, basically. But I'll stop whinging. Let's just get on with it. Live by the needle, die by the needle. Honestly, I decided that I didn't like the positioning. I unpicked the stitch I just did, repositioned it, and now I can't find my needle, which obviously is the only one I own. I must have angered the sewing gods once again. Yeah, it's not actually the only one I own. I'll just go and get another one. It was stuck magnetically to the back of my phone. Who knows how? Magnetism, presumably. Well, this is not exactly sparking much joy right now, I'm not gonna lie. I've aligned and realigned before that first stitch about 3 or 4 times now. I think there's just something fundamentally slightly mismatching between the two. If I have the roll line and the hem matching, then that means the dart angle is slightly off between the canvas and the jacket, and if I match the other, then the other two are off. I'll work it out. I don't think it's too disastrous, to be quite honest. My foolish experiments with the bias cutting anyway may have rendered all of this rather relevant, so let's cross fingers, eh? Yeah, of all the various basting stitches to attach the canvas to the jacket, this is the one that's always the most fun. The one that feels like you're really taking care of business. You know, the load-bearing stitch, if you like. Oh, dear me, yeah. Why don't you go and make a cup of tea or something so that you don't have to watch, so that you can spare yourself screaming at the screen, no, for the love of God, Pat, what are you doing? Look at this, shifting around all over the place. Yeah, I don't know, it's just nice, isn't it? Talk about taking years off my life. Dear me. Oh, I think it will do, though. I think it will do. Yeah, I definitely expected to be having a little bit more fun doing this than I am. At least with this jacket, I haven't got all that inlay in. Also because I positioned my pattern lazily, didn't leave enough room to camfer it, and then I just thought, to hell with it. Let's live dangerously. But obviously I know this pattern now, I know how it does or doesn't fit me. And I've got inlay in the place where it really counts, like the side seams there. So just trimming the canvas even with the jacket front now. Yeah, I really can't help but feel like something got slightly out of hand with this canvas making today. I'm just gonna try not to worry too much about it. But I can't be too grumpy, and besides, I did pick this fight. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter, because I have a treat for myself in store. Some of you will know what's coming, and for those of you who don't, well, buckle up. I think I'm gonna get myself a coffee before I get started. Make myself comfortable. Don't know what it is, every time I get to a sort of consequential step in the construction of this jacket so far, the heavens outside just erupt with a undeniable fury that can only leave me wondering what it is I've done. I just love all the sort of little details of this step. You know, having the lapel hanging over the edge of a table or whatever it may be, maybe some books, in order to encourage the canvas to take on this sort of natural roll shape. It's just such an easy thing to do that can make such a significant difference. And then obviously just the pad stitching itself, truly one of the most satisfying stitches to do. Yeah, but I think between both of these canvas pieces, this is certainly going to take upwards of a few hours to do. Truly one of the sewing life's signature pleasures. I think I'm going to have to start finding something new to say about this, because every time I do it, I just descend into these weird little rhapsodies of ecstasy. If that's not too oxymoronic, or indeed moronic. I think it's just the blend of the sort of visible pleasantness of this stitch. You know, you're looking at the stitches you've done, stitches you've taken, and just thinking, that just looks really nice. There's something about the pad stitch pattern that is especially pleasing. These sort of, I've chosen a really good time to go on this rant, haven't I? Sort of crisscrossing, overlapping, and yet parallel running series of stitches that just, as you're doing them, look so nice. And it's always just like, I don't know, it's almost like doodling. You're just taking your time, you're not really thinking about anything because you're focused on the task at hand, but it's also not somehow stressful or difficult to execute it per se, although I'm not exactly doing the best job at all points here. And then combined with that sort of repetitive, relatively undemanding and visually pleasing motion, there's this sort of satisfied sense of knowing that the process that you're executing here is a very worthwhile one. It's worth the time investment because of the effect that ideally it's going to yield. The way the canvas is, as is often said, floating, it's very comprehensively connected to the garment panel, but also only in these certain tactical ways, you know. And even in the lapel, the relative flexibility compared to, say, you know, if you're fusing on a fusible interfacing piece and literally every square millimeter of fabric is connected to, you know, the fusible, and it becomes quite stiff. You know, this is just generating this sort of firmly connected and yet loosely flexible effect, and indeed with this roll on the table generating that really handsome natural roll of a lapel that we all like to see on these garments. It just makes it a very happy process to know that putting in this effort here, putting in this time, is going to yield ideally that kind of positive result. You know, when the sun's shining outside, it doesn't hurt either. This is honestly just the thing I needed to kind of settle my nerves after my little canvas panics. Yeah, I'm curious, to those of you who have made tailored garments yourself in this sort of manner before, what are your like favourite parts of the construction? I think some of you have already answered that question at various points in the past, but I think the pad stitching of the lapels, just for pure time spent versus enjoyment derived, wins hands down for me. And I just feel like the finished article, just to look at, has this weird sort of very satisfying under the hood fascination. Yeah, what about you? Is it making the collar? Is it setting the sleeves? You filthy animals? Talk to me. It's kind of hard too to even think how you would replicate this using a machine. You can have machines that do essentially a prick stitch, which I guess, you know, how it appears on the other side with these little points, maybe that's analogous. It's just one of those processes and techniques which truly magnifies all the best things about making these garments in this manner, in that the reward you get on your investment for doing these by hand steps with these different fabrics, all these different layers, all these different construction techniques, clearly does set it apart from the, you know, quicker and, you know, in some cases cheaper alternatives, such as iron-on fusibles, which again, the first suit I made, I used iron-on fusibles. You know, especially if you do want to get making these kind of garments, but you feel like doing it this way is a step too far at this stage, which is extremely understandable, totally okay, obviously, don't need me to tell you that. Then, you know, a fusible is, I think, an acceptable route to take. But yeah, I would heartily recommend getting on this as soon as you can if you're interested, because you will not look back. Morning everybody, and indeed it is morning, quite early morning. I don't have all the time that I'd like today to do some proper sewing. Don't need all that for now. Thought it rather unfair that I hadn't shown you any of this delightful stuff yet. A bit of mark stitch snipping. These are the back panels, which I'd only just cut actually the other day, rather than along with the front panels. This was due to my extremely blunt fabric shears, which I just couldn't bear to snip with any further. Yeah, I really do only have a couple of hours today, so I'm gonna skip the taping for now. I'll get on with it later, because I feel like both you and I will be more interested in seeing the fitting than that. Yeah, I think any of you who followed along the wedding suit series may remember that I neglected to do a proper fitting at this stage in that case. And while I'd done a toile fitting beforehand, so to test the pattern and whatnot, and had, you know, done it to my satisfaction, I hadn't then refit it. And then by the time I got to doing the collar and the shoulders, due to some sort of faulty sewing, I ended up confusing things very much and causing lots of problems with the tightness of the collar and the neckline. And what's more, there was also the armhole situation where, you know, I'd wanted not to necessarily disrupt the sort of chest fullness more than I needed to, and then just sort of snipped it freewheelingly during the construction of that particular jacket, and never really got round to putting it back onto the pattern. So I'm basically starting again on that front. What's more, many of you may recall the torment that I endured during my sleeve setting episode. A lot of that was also to do with the rather excessive length of the sleeve cap itself in comparison to the armhole. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to find a way to basically enlarge my armhole without, you know, having to lower it necessarily. So by basically scooping it more into the chest fullness, of which I think there's currently a good bit to spare. But we'll see, you know, I think my sleeve pattern is a fundamentally good pattern. I can obviously make that smaller, and indeed I think I should do just for other reasons anyway, partially to solve this problem of sleeve being uncomfortably big for armhole. But yeah, it is a tale of two halves. It is a tango that takes two to do. So yeah, those are the sort of the main objectives today. Fit this properly, come away knowing what changes I need to transfer to the pattern, be ready to go. Et voila. I think that's how you say that. So yes, here they are, my wonderful pad stitch lapels. And in case, incidentally, anyone doesn't know what it was I was just doing, those mark stitches there, those little sort of white tacks, you know, not dissimilar to these ones here, Indeed, exactly like these ones here. Imagine you have a sewing pattern for, I don't know, a quote unquote normal garment like a shirt. It has its seam allowance already included, but then imagine that you wanted to add extra seam allowance on top of that, which is what I've done in certain places here. That's called inlay. I don't want to put that into the pattern, but what I do want to know is where the edge of the true seam allowance is. So the seam allowance that's in the pattern already, let's say 1 centimeter, as is the case in this case. So what those stitches represent is where the actual edges of the pattern were on the fabric, if that makes sense. So including the baseline seam allowance, but before I've added the inlay. So if you imagine I was cutting this out, the pattern is here and the edge of the paper is where these tacks are, and then I drew on this extra inlay around it. And again, these tacks here and also in some other places to mark specific important points like pocket positions and things like that, they just help me know where it is exactly I need to sew, because for instance, when I sew this to the back piece, which doesn't have any inlay along this relevant edge, I'll know that I want the cut edge of the back panel piece to line up with these stitches and not with the edge, because this is just spare fabric that I'm saving in case I need it later down the line. Anyway, so speaking of seam allowances, what I'm just doing now is trimming the front edge of the canvas so that it leaves the actual garment fabric seam allowance free. So in other words, the edge of the canvas now is along where the actual stitch line is going to be when I put the facing on. And if you want to know whether I've been basically freehanding this, the answer is yes, I have. Rock and roll. Yoink. It always gets a bit confusing at the hem, to be quite honest, because I'm an idiot. All right then. So to be a little less enigmatic, what is going to happen today is I'm going to take the main panels, so this sort of front/side body unit that I've got here, which is now almost fully canvas. Again, there's going to be some taping going on here and around the front of the jacket, and I'm going to take that with the back panels, sew the back and side seams, sew the shoulder seams, put the shoulder pads in and attach just the collar linen canvas part of the eventual collar. And I say so, I'm just going to base it together, so not like permanent stitches or anything. I'm just going to use that to get an idea of how things are fitting, because, you know, I don't want to sort of finish the construction of the jacket or, you know, put it all together, put the lining in and everything, and then find that actually I need to take it in by an inch at the waist, or the armhole, which I've already sewn a sleeve onto, is actually like way too tight and there's loads of bunching and all this stuff. You know, better just to check now. Let's do it responsibly. And as far as the morning's work goes, it's pretty pleasant, and you get the payoff at the end of actually, you know, getting to put something on. Anyway, yeah, so you can see again about the inlay point I mentioned earlier. That's the inlay line there, and I'm sewing an extra 1 centimeter in here because the seam allowance in the pattern is 1 centimeter, so this is going to be the actual stitch line here, 1 centimeter in from that inlay edge. Yeah, and you can see here I've also tried to do a little bit of iron working around the shoulder blade area, as is, you know, customary, just to allow extra room for that pokey part of the body to move around. Yeah, so trying to do a not super tight, but also not super loose base here. You know, I want it to be holding together in a believable fashion, and not just flopping around, pulling around, snapping apart. Really any of those things. Yep, so there's the basic back panel now. I'll just press that seam open and attach it to the front panels. Actually, before I do that, I'm just gonna base back these seam allowances on the front edge of the front panels, just to kind of keep them out of the way. And also, obviously, I'll do the hems as well, but I'll do that when I've attached the front and back panels. Yeah, I'm not gonna bother folding over this top bit either. I mean, the collar's just gonna go under there. It's just that front edge of the jacket. It'll make it much easier for me if I can just have that accurately represented now. Oh, and this is extremely satisfying, actually. Look at that. That looks very handsome. If I may say so myself. I may, I will, and I did. Cool. Incidentally, if you want to know if I recommend doing a proper fitting at this stage in your construction, the answer is unequivocally yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. You may feel like you're in too much of a hurry, you're too excited to get on with the actual construction and you'll just tweak it as you go. But I really mean it. Even if you have done a toile fitting beforehand, and especially if you did what I did last time and made changes to the pattern based on that fitting, but then not done a second toile fitting, and even then, even just making sure that with the canvas and any reinforcements you've done, with just the garment fabric itself and the way that might behave versus the toile fabric, it's definitely worth doing. It's really, you know, borderline essential. And it's definitely 100,000% the case if it's like a new pattern or one you haven't toiled or tested, or especially a commercial pattern. You know, maybe you're just going off the size as you would if you were shopping for a jacket, you know, your chest size. You know, especially the more sort of, if you like, fundamental issues of fit, how it fits around the chest, how it fits around the waist. You don't want to be leaving that until you've essentially already sewn those seams and, God forbid, started putting the lining in. If you want to know how I know all this, one word for it, and that word is experience. And you can have a little taste of it here, should you wish. I mean, even things just as trivial as weight fluctuations can suddenly throw things into disarray, and it really is just best to get ahead of them before you get too trigger happy with the machine, or before you close up your lining, for instance, by hand, only to unpick it and do it again. Okay, so enough doom and gloom. It's time to do the shoulder seams, and you may remember, or you may just happen to know, there's something fun going on with these, which is that the back panel's shoulder seam is, I think, 1.5 centimeters longer than the front panels. And that is so that I can ease that into the middle of the shoulder seam, and that's gonna allow it to curve around gently towards the front panel on the shoulder to just sort of mimic a bit more the natural curve of the shoulder bones. Yeah, so I've just started on the neckline edge here, and I've pinned at the opposite end, at the armhole end, just the first inch or so of this shoulder seam. You can see here this excess on the back panel, and that is all just gonna get eased around, distributed across the whole length of the seam, just by doing little kind of, you know, little bubbles. I'm not gonna worry about getting it, I mean, obviously, well, there's no reason not to try and get it even here now. You know, if it's a little bit visually bubbly, that's kind of okay, as long as it sort of holds the shape that it's eventually going to have. And incidentally, both now and when it comes to the actual sewing of the shoulder seam, as you can see, I'm not taking the canvas with me. I'm just using the garment fabric, and the canvas is going to get rolled up. And eventually that will get sort of permanently stitched into the shoulder pad, which itself will get permanently stitched into the armholes, seam allowances, and things like that. Yeah, I've been a bit too lazy with this base, I think, so I'm just going to try and lock in these bubbles with some extra stitches. And indeed, when it comes to properly sewing the shoulder seam, I will press these bubbles out, so the ease will remain in the bit immediately on the inside of the shoulder beyond the seam that I will eventually sew. Within the actual seam itself, it will have been kind of pressed away, and it will just create this nice sort of voluminous effect. Again, just another little tailoring quirk that allows for a bit more three-dimensionality. Yeah, it's gonna be fun unpicking all this. It's worth the trouble. It's a very delicate effect, but you can kind of see how that wants to curve around now, banana-wise. So this being the back panel, and this being the front panel. Not far now, almost done. Just attaching this inner linen collar piece, not colon. That would be rather painful. Yeah, so again, this is gonna go between eventually a piece of collar melton, which is sort of felt like wool on the very underside, and then on the top, obviously a bit of garment fabric. It's all just gonna be the same shape. And this is just this sort of structural, internal, central piece. Holds it together and allows it also to be shaped, because this has been cut on the bias, and you know, I've been able to contort it in order to account for the actual curvature of my neck, because, you know, it is indeed a curve and not a straight line, as people have alleged. Yeah, this has been a very satisfying exercise. I'm glad I've done this. I'm really looking forward to trying it on, seeing how it's panned out. Part of me feels like I should have some sort of moratorium on doing some random basty hand stitch step and then saying, oh, this is so satisfying. But then again, why refrain from playing the hits, eh? Such as they may be. What you would often see in an actual, I say what you would often see, I've literally never been part of one. You know, what you will often see in photos or videos of an actual professional bespoke fitting is, instead of the actual finished collar piece structure, just a sort of larger slab basically of this fabric, because then during the fitting you can on the fly basically modify the style and the shape of it according to, you know, what is desired or needed. I know that this collar style is what I want. I don't need to, you know, have that excess that I'm then going to trim away. But yeah, that is why mine looks like this, and others you may have seen look like that. But yeah, eventually, for instance, when I do a double-breasted project, which I think I will, 1 or 2 projects down the line, it might be that I take that approach and yeah, just start with a big start with a big slab of collar linen and pare it down from there according to what I think looks nice. And of course, I can't forget these handsome devils. I know I've always been talking about how I'm going to make my own shoulder pads. But as it happens, this has now become a time-pressured project, because I need to have it done in about a month, and I, you know, for something that I've never done yet as far as making shoulder pads is concerned, I'm not going to burden myself with it now. And I do really like these ones that I get from one of my local supply shops. They're good, you know, they work, and indeed the pattern is now basically oriented around the thickness that they have. So for now at least, I'm not going to rock that particular boat. Yeah, again, not being especially precious about this either, just getting it roughly in the right place. So I tend to have the actual padded bit of these particular shoulder pads ending at the back pitch point on the back panel for where, you know, guiding where the sleeve is angled around. And yeah, it comes right up to what would be the cutting edge. So again, in this case, the line of my mark stitches here. And I'm really just gonna give it a few rough bastes through the top layer of the pad just to hold it in place while I'm trying it on. In the final garment, this is gonna go between the garment fabric and the, wait, no, it's gonna go between, where does it go between? I think it's gonna go between the, you know what, I've forgotten. I can't remember if it goes between the canvas and the lining or the canvas and the garment fabric. Well, we'll find out in a couple of weeks, won't we? Or else I'll check and put it in textually here. Ugh. Oh, come on. And there you have it, folks. Let's go try this bad boy on. I know I always say this, but overall I'm feeling pretty good about that. I mean, some of the same issues from the first time I fitted the last jacket, again, because I haven't actually retrofitted those pattern changes onto the pattern. You can see that kind of bunching coming out from under the collar. It's possible that's a sign that the neckline is just a tiniest bit still too tight. I might see about letting it out really just 0.5 centimetre or so, but it also might just be once I've properly put the shoulder seams in and pressed all that away and all that jazz, and indeed once the full collar is in and sort of holding its shape, that maybe that goes away in this case. I'll have a think about it. Yep, armholes, no surprise, they need to get opened up. I didn't just expect that I'd have to do that, I knew for a fact I'd have to do that. But yeah, you can just see that bunching around the chest, that isn't, you know, this sort of handsome ease, that is just the armhole trying to get away from my armpit basically, because there's not enough room for it to sit. I also kind of wonder if there's something slightly off with the balance. You know, that the grain line of the front of the jacket is maybe not going straight down, but is perhaps angling out a little bit, as if the fronts of the jacket wanted to sort of skirt away from the central line. And you can also kind of see there's almost this collapsing tendency in the lapels. I mean, the fact that I can't seem to decide for sure whether this is a problem leads me to think that I will just kind of not worry about it too much with this particular jacket, but it might be something that I investigate with the pattern going forward. If I'm letting things out around the neckline at the sort of shoulder seams, if I do make changes there, that's also maybe going to affect the balance. So I just need to bear that in mind, and it might be that I have to make another toile for the next jacket. We'll see. You can see the sort of roundedness of the back seam there. It's kind of creating these ripples up towards the back of the collar. Again, that's just because I sort of added this rounded shape to the back seam over my shoulder blades, essentially elongating the back seam. And obviously it was just kind of the wrong thing, or maybe just too much of the right thing. So I'll straighten that out again, and again, try and achieve that ease with a bit more ironwork maybe around the shoulder blades, and also perhaps experiment with tweaking the pattern in other ways to attain that. And indeed, both in the front panel and the back panel, you know, just essentially achieving a bit more of drape in the chest. But I'm gonna go and have a ponder and see if I can work it out. For now though, I think for this jacket, it's okay. It's snug, but it's, you know, it's not like it's gonna tear apart any of the seams or anything, I hope. Speaking of, as it were, it's possible that the waist could be taken in a touch more, actually. I mean, it's still, you know, the tiniest little bit loose. It could be a little bit more shapely. That's very straightforward. I can do that straight up on the pattern, and I'll just remember that when I'm sewing it, I just maybe, you know, overall 1 centimetre on each side on the waist, up to the waist notch and out again. I can do that. So I've just ran away there and tried to trim away a bit of the right armhole just to sort of compare and contrast. And yeah, I can feel and indeed see that that is much better. That bunching up isn't really happening there, and I've got more mobility. I think if there was even more chest ease in the pattern, you know, if it was more of this sort of drapey English cut kind of thing, look at me acting as if I know what I'm talking about, then I could be even more greedy basically in what I were trying to cut away. It's lying neatly across my chest. There's still a little bit of room to move around, and it's not, you know, absolutely skin tight or anything. And I'll just see now when it comes to putting the sleeves on how it feels, and if I need to alter the sleeve itself rather than the armhole further, so be it. It's about time I bit that bullet. Look at this, we got our facings attached. That's all arranged now. The lapels are kind of complete. Well, in a second anyway. Now, as established viewers will know, I have a little bit of a, shall we say, slippy history with lining fabric selection. I always tend to sort of just end up with fabrics that I'm actually not massively pleased about, but we'll see in this case. You can all take your votes, and you know, worst case, it'll be on the inside, so no one's actually really going to see it much. A lot of you had very fun suggestions for lining fabric colours. As I'd said, I think I just wanted to go for a plain cotton to complement, I guess, heat-wise, texture-wise, the linen cotton blend here. And, you know, I'm still a little bit sheepish about trying to dive into any more sort of funky prints and whatnot. But yeah, we had some fun thoughts. We had like sort of orange tones. I think mint green came up a couple of times, you know, sort of like nice pastel-y mint green, and that was kind of what I was hoping to find, but none of them really had the appropriate shade, and I was kind of in a bit of a hurry, to be honest, because I wanted to get on with it, and so I landed on what I landed on, which I'll show you now. Well, here we have it, friends. Read it and weep. So this is, I guess, what you'd call burgundy, this sort of winey without H, relatively natural-ish tone, although again, I don't really know what in the natural world would really correspond to this, but yeah, I'm not mad about it. And I know I said that last time, but I think this time it's even more the case. You know, yeah, I think it matches well enough, and it's at least not too ostentatious to, you know, if I really do decide that I'm not into it whatsoever, that at least I won't be thinking, oh God, every single time I open up that jacket or don't have it closed shut with a button, I'll just be conscious of this disgraceful abomination. But enough of these slanderous remarks about this poor darling fabric. Just gonna kind of work on the left front today, get my Barcelona pocket done, get the facing attached to the lining, and we'll see how we get on. Oh, before I do though, check out this goof. You may recall from the fitting last week that I wanted to scoop in the armhole a bit more, which I have done, and it's helped obviously free up the arm mechanism, if you like, itself. But I was quite conscious, as I think I may have whinged, about not wanting to scoop too far in because I didn't have a ton of chest ease to work with, and I'm afraid I might have overshot the mark slightly. And you know, obviously whatever I did on the one side, I had to make it match on the other side. So that's what I've done, and I think it's most telling here with the breast welt pocket. So really the breast welt pocket should not be any nearer than basically just under 4 centimeters away, or 1.5 inches from the stitch line of the where the arm's going to go, basically, or where the sleeve's going to go. which is about here. And I think I've now basically got just under an inch or just over an inch, around an inch, let's say. So not ideal, but I checked it out still while it was still basted up after last week. And I think, you know, it's at least not the case that it's like really taut across my chest now. There's just about enough ease to make it work. And, you know, I personally am not too fussed about the aesthetics, if you like, or the appearance of this pocket being nearer maybe to the sleeve than it supposedly should be, but we'll see how it pans out, won't we? Somewhat insultingly, this fabric actually has a really luscious quality to it on the preview screen of my camera, much more so than in real life, that being, alas, the realm in which I'm gonna have to wear it. You know what, moratorium on nasty comments about my lining, I think. I don't know why I say that as if it's your fault. Ooh. So as you'll know if you watch the wedding suit series, my lining is just cut based off the actual garment panels itself, so I haven't got separate pattern pieces for the lining. And as you all know, also if you watch the wedding suit series, but as you may just know, because it is true as a rule, the lining pieces are slightly bigger than the garment pieces because, you know, if they were identical, then there would just constantly be an excess of tension between the lining panels and the garment panels, and we don't want that. Things are going to then tear. I mean, there's extra bits in tactical places like around the sleeves and up here at the top, but overall there's about sort of 0.5 centimetre on each edge extra on the lining pieces versus the garment pieces. Okie dokie, now what am I doing here? Okay, and what I'm now doing is basically, at the top here there was about 5 centimetres of excess left in, and I'm putting in this little pleat here, and that's just going to allow a lot of whatever the opposite of lateral is, ease going up and down. I'm pretty sure I made the exact same lateral remark there actually when I did the wedding suit, but who cares? Can't plagiarise myself, can I? I will go and press this as well like a good boy. Yeah, obviously please do let me know what you think of my lining choice. I do hope one day as well to sort of transcend and get into, as it were, the more funkier linings of the world. Just gonna trim this a little bit here. You know, maybe the occasional print, the occasional pattern. I did actually see one rather adorable in one of the fabric shops near me, which is actually kind of a bit more catered towards, I think, you know, sewing things for children, but they often have a lot of really nice cottons. And there was this one, it had this mint green base, which was just the green I was looking for, but the print on it was this like huge daisy print situation. And I did think that could be actually quite adorable. And maybe next time I'll have the guts. So yeah, the Barcelona pocket, one of many pocket options that you could go for when doing your internal pocket, your sort of inside lining pocket or pockets. You can just do like a normal kind of piped welt pocket situation. But this one is not only more fun, I think, but also actually kind of easier, I'm not gonna lie. I find it really quite straightforward to make. There's no sort of weird unpleasant snippy bits that you get with like pipe pockets, and yeah, they just look very handsome. And again, this series of videos isn't really meant to be kind of educational in any way, unlike the wedding suit series, so if you do want to actually have a tutorial on how to make one of these pockets, you can find that here. Oh, I'm such an erratic sewer. Yeah, so I'm doing this thing of just basting shut the inner, what will become the pocket opening for now, and just tacking one at the ends to make sure that it stays nice and firm when I do open that up. See what I mean? Forthwith. All right, so these are my little pocketing bags, also outlining, and I'm just trimming these on a little 1.5 centimetre slant as well, because that's the same slant. Oh my goodness, am I? Try my best. Yeah, that's the same slant that the pocket is going to be on. It's kind of like with the breast welt pocket as well. You need to arrange everything on the slant so that once it's all set up in its final form within the jacket, within the lining, it will fall perpendicular to the floor. Perpendicular to the floor? Yeah, perpendicular to the floor, parallel to the direction of gravity, if you like. So depending on how impatient you may or may not be with my blunt fabric shears, this may or may not come across as good news. We have a little bit of snipping to do. So this here is the pocket placement marking lines whatever. Again, it's on this slight little slant that's going to be offset by the pocket bag eventually. You'll see what happens. Don't need to spoil it. Yeah, so just getting it arranged in this kind of crosswise fashion. It's not snip too far. And it does then get a little bit finicky because of just the lightness basically of the lining fabrics invariably. But I believe, if not in my own capabilities to execute this, then in your deserving it. So for your sake, if not my own, I'll give it my all. Okie dokie. How do you like that, eh? So there's those little corners folded under, hence the snipping, and this eventually is going to sort of slot in here. But why spoil it, eh? Yeah, this is one thing I do love about the cotton linings, is that they are just very manageable fabrics to play around with. For this step, I think with the last one I did, it was this sort of imitation, silky, viscosy situation. It was just very fiddly and not much fun. So now comes the rather fiddly part. Ooh, before top stitching this bad boy on. Yeah, obviously there is an endless array of pockets and pocket types, pocket amounts that you could put on the inside of your jacket. It's really entirely up to you. It's just funny really because, you know, for someone who spends so much time making suits, I actually almost never wear them. Although I guess that might change once I've built up a adequate supply. And yeah, you know, I'm not exactly a sort of international man of mystery. I don't really have the need for several hundred little internal funky purpose-built pockets. So I always tend to just do this one sort of notional pocket really. Oh, how are we gonna do this? But maybe there is a sort of slightly more James Bondy future for me ahead. Well, I hope not. That always look like a lot of trouble, a lot of faff, a lot of unpleasantness involved. I don't think James Bond has much time to sew either, so all right, that should hold up nicely. Yeah, any fellow tailors out there, please let me know what your preferred inside pocket type is, and indeed everyone else. Which pocket type do you most enjoy making? Because a lot of them are a little bit headache inducing sometimes. You know, they have their moments. This one is definitely high up on my list of favorites. I just feel like it's a low risk, high reward. And it's just it's got that sort of niche fascination. Yeah, you really do have to take your time and take care with your top stitching here. Otherwise, it's all wasted effort really. Okay. Okay, yeah, well I started to feel that concentration was so paramount that I actually couldn't really do it on camera. So here we are with the semi-final result. Even then, it's not especially mind-bogglingly fantastic, but slightly neater than the last time, so that's all I can ask for really, isn't it? It is quite annoying having to hop constantly back on the machine though. After weeks and weeks of pure hand stitching, more or less. Now I love my machine. So that's caught the pocketing now on the other side. So I've got the first pocketing bag in place now, so that was attached like that, and as you can see now, accounting for these respective slants, they kind of cancel each other out, and everything is now running, as I said, parallel to the direction of gravity. So, what am I doing? Got to do the other one now. Oh, it's always so hard to tell which edge is the one that you've trimmed the slant off. Okay, I guess it's that one. Maybe it's not that hard after all. Just closing up the pocket bag now, getting ready for the big reveal. Oh, I think that might be the machine done for the day. That'd be nice. Ugh. I've got to say, I'm glad that I've plunged into this suit project relatively quickly after the last one. I think normally there's a bit more of a break. But I can definitely feel, I guess, with that relatively quick turnaround, the sense of just already knowing better kind of what to do, not having to puzzle so much about every step before, you know, taking the plunge. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling, yeah, because this is now my fourth jacket, my third doing proper sort of canvassing. So yeah, shouldn't really be any excuses, should there? So now, yeah, just ripping open this seam now, which was only closed with essentially a very long basted stitch with the machine. Yes, so this is now the official pocket opening. And this again is what I like about this pocket, is it's just all basically just like normal top stitching. As I said, unlike a welt pocket or a, what's the other one, you know, a sort of jetted pocket, there's no sort of nerve-wracking snipping to do. I mean, there's some snipping, but it's just not very nerve-wracking. So yeah, anyway, there you go. There's your Barcelona pocket. Yeah, I tend to avoid button and button tab because I just don't really like the bulk. And also because I guess I was a bit lazy, but what are you gonna do? Sue me. Okay, silly me. We're not done with the machine because we've got to sew these together, don't we? But after that, it's all basting. Yeah, it can be a little bit mind-bending trying to get these edges to match up, but you just gotta remember to ensure that you can see the relevant fringe of lining excess at the respective edge. So 5 centimeters hem allowance down here at the bottom, and then the 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters up at the top here. And just, yeah, try and make sure it's not stretching out either. That wouldn't be good. Although there will be a little bit of tugging and pulling because of the way these curves have to bend round. But don't worry, once it's stitched and folded back around the right way, all shall be well. All right, machine, fine. Here you come. Ooh. Yeah, I would be curious to know, well, 2 things basically, I guess, from people who also have this kind of tailoring experience or, you know, hobby tailoring experience, whatever you want to call it. I mean, how many projects was it until you really felt like you kind of knew what you were doing? I always feel like I'm getting towards there, and obviously every time it's, you know, a little bit better. But yeah, whether it's you like making full suits or waistcoats or maybe even kind of historical garments or just trousers, just jackets, I don't know. What was the project basically? What was the point? How many reps did you have to get in before you really felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing from here? And again, never mind tailoring stuff. Perhaps you haven't attempted these kind of garments before, or you're not especially interested in making them yourself, and generally you're sewing different kinds of things. I mean, what was the project, or what was the point at which you felt, okay, I've broken through maybe this sort of beginner phase now, and I feel like, you know, if someone were to ask me, say, to teach them the ropes, I would be able to do so. You know, I think about this sort of a lot, especially with having made these videos, a lot of which have an implicit, if not explicit, tutorial angle. And at certain points I've thought, you know, it's a bit weird to feel like I am trying to basically educate anyone on anything to do with this stuff when I'm still learning myself. Although, you know, I do feel like that's a principle of learning, isn't it? You know, you don't have to just only learn from the absolute masters, the absolute experts of the field. You know, as long as you're learning from someone who is 1 or more steps ahead of you, then you're still going to make that same progress, hopefully. Curious to know what your experiences are with getting that feeling of, okay, I no longer feel sort of slightly panicked and disoriented by doing these things. I just think, oh yeah, it's that thing, I've got to do that now. This, that, and t'other. Now she blows, ladies and gentlemen, now she blows. You know, now I see it like this, I do feel more at peace with the lining selection, actually. It does seem to blend a bit more happily than I feared it might. And look at this, if it isn't a little bit of balance returning to the force, because we're basting, machine's away, Again, not that I have anything against our machine. And yeah, we're just getting everything locked down for the steps to come. Yeah, I do hope no one particularly minds the fact that I'm obviously glossing over a few steps this time around, because the time frame I have to make this suit, which is now needed in about a month's time, combined then, or compared then to the time I actually have available to do the sewing, compared then to the relative time it takes to film and whatnot, I just don't really have said time, unfortunately. But again, if you want to see the whole shebang from start to finish, you can do that here. But I'll stop unnecessarily apologising for myself. I'm told it's one of my more annoying traits. I'm sorry. Yeah, one recurrent theme in the construction of this jacket is that anytime I have had to do, for instance, pad stitching or cross stitching, I've almost gone out of my way to, well, whether it's to do with cutting myself slack or not, I have cut myself some slack by just doing bigger stitches than last time. And I actually think though in this context it makes sense, because so here what I'm doing basically is just cross stitching the seam allowance of the facing and the lining into the canvas, and that's going to be a permanent stitch that's going to stay in the jacket, and that's just going to help fix basically the lining and facing edge to the canvas, just help make sure that it's not just a whole bunch of floating stuff between the, well yeah, basically between the jacket edge and back seam, basically, just that there's a little bit more, you know, fixity. But then, you know, you don't want it to be so fixed, as with so many things with the canvas, you know, you want it to be fixed but free still in some way, you know, it's floating, as they like to say. And I guess, at least this is what I'm telling myself, by taking a slightly more generous stitch here, I'm just allowing, you know, a bit more flexibility, because I guess if I was taking tiny stitches here and really pulling them tight, I would be really, really jamming home that seam and, you know, not really maybe leaving as much wiggle room as is healthy. But maybe I'm just making this up. Maybe this is just pure delusion, justifying oversight that has no justification. We'll see, won't we? I mean, wouldn't be the first time, would it? Yeah, now I have it before me. I should also remark, because I think I forgot in last week's video, which incidentally you can find here, that the absence of the collar linen panel that would otherwise, or can go across the top of the shoulder, seemed not to have caused any sort of collapsing effect, which I was happy to see, because it just, you know, proves, I guess, that if I so choose, if with a sort of lighter garment like this one, you know, a sort of summarier garment, I want to just take a chill pill with the padding of the chest, then I can do, and it's not going to have any dramatic structural implications. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this flannel actually in this roll. I think that's worked quite well too, which is good because I have tons of it left over. Yeah, and you would definitely want to take extra care, I think, when doing this stitch to ensure that they weren't coming through to the right side of the garment, because obviously if at the very end you're taking out all your basting and everything's closed up and you find that actually one stitch had come through and you need to snip it, then you would essentially have introduced a weak link in this chain of stitches that could only really be repaired if you then opened everything back up and redid it. So let's try and avoid that, shall we? Not that I was paying sufficient attention to be able to say for sure that I haven't done that, but we'll find out. I'll be careful not to sew this lovely coaster into my blazer. Oh, come on. Now with all my blathering about feeling as if I'd perhaps hit a certain baseline of proficiency with all this tailoring stuff, this is something that I'm definitely looking forward to upskilling out of, namely the blasted thread coming out of the blasted needle. Pardon my French. Oh, thank goodness. Well, this is somewhat macabre. I seem to have gotten some basting thread in the end of my coffee. The Italians, not only do they make the best food, but they also make the tastiest basting thread. Yep, and this too now, just one last sort of structural securingness, only on the pocketing side. So I guess any pockets that you have done on your front lining, you would do this if you can as well with the seam allowances of the pocket, just cross stitch them as well into the canvas only. So if you had another pocket down here, for instance, you know, you do the same thing, just any relevant edge basically. And yeah, almost done for today. Indeed, lunchtime is beckoning, and as I say, I think I'm going to have to do a bit more of this for homework for next week, as I've already done in the last week, because time really is of the essence now. And again, it was never my intention with this series anyhow to really show every step like last time. So I wonder where we'll end up next week. Could be that we're already onto the collar. Could be that we're already onto the sleeves. Can you imagine? Ugh, sleeves. Yeah, and then before you know it, it'll be trouser time and we'll be testing out my corrected pattern, about which I have good feelings. But of what worth, I ask you, are good feelings if you still have a massive wedgie? Feast your eyes on this. Made a lot of progress over the last week. We've done the shoulder pads and indeed the shoulder seams. We finished the facings, did the lining, even did a half respectable vent, I would say. Slight improvement on last time. Anyhow, not worried about that for now, because we're constructing the collar, one of my favourites. As you can see, I've already gotten started with this, just hanging out today and finishing it off. If you do need or want a tutorial on how to make a collar like this for a suit jacket, then you can find that here. But if you're just here for the good times and the warm vibes, well, you've come to the right place. Well, I certainly hope you have. Who knows what's going to go wrong. Now, the big theme of today and of this step of the construction is the bias of the fabrics involved. The bias being kind of the diagonal angle that cuts across, or maybe across is the confusing word to use, cuts between the cross grain and the straight grain of the fabric. So, you know, if they have literally a cross, straight grain, cross grain, it's going at the diagonal. And so the idea is that when you're cutting out these panels, instead of lining up the pattern pieces so that when you cut them out, the straight grain is going directly down, you just rotate the pattern pieces so that instead everything is shifted sort of, 45 degrees, so that everything's kind of running at this diagonal. And you can sort of see this here because this fabric is quite chunky, quite, what's the word? I think with linen it's like slubby? Anyway, so this is the direction at which it's going to be worn. So that's the bottom edge of the collar and that's the top edge of the collar. And you can see that the grain, rather than going down towards where the floor is going to be related to this piece once it's on the garment, the grain is actually rotated around and it's going this way. I can't actually remember which is the straight and the cross grain in this scenario. Let's say that's the straight grain, that's the cross grain. So that's what it means when you've cut something on the bias, or that is what results when you cut something on the bias. Now, the reason why this biasness is so important in the construction of the collar is because of all the three-dimensionality it needs to have, basically. It's wrapping around the neck and shoulders in essentially kind of two different directions at once. I'm going to use the iron and press the collar in such a way as to exploit the biasness of it, exploit that sort of instability, if you like, because the structure has been denied the stability of the straight and the cross grain. And yeah, using steam, using the iron, we're going to generate that three-dimensionality and achieve a shape that is actually more concordant with the shape of my neck, basically. Ugh. There we go. Yeah, it's always a bit tricky trimming this edge, but yeah, it'll do. So now these pieces are connected to each other, I can begin the preparations for the first of these ironing segments. So I'm putting it up along the roll line like this, basting that in place, and then yeah, you'll see what happens. Yeah, you know the best part about today? No machine. I mean, you can already see here, like, it's just very pliable. Maybe you can't see it as clearly as I can feel it, but there's just a lot of springiness around the axes where I want there to be springiness or flexibility. And yeah, in a second, I'm gonna exploit that to the fullest. So again, you can see here, this line here is the fold of the roll line. So if you imagine the fold of the lapel is going to continue up into the collar and along this fold here. And as you can see, it's kind of pretty much a straight line right now. But again, I want to achieve a roundedness, a three-dimensionality. So essentially, in my case at least, because I have sloped shoulders, so it doesn't need to be super deep, ends up in a curve a little bit more like this, sort of about 4 centimeters deep there. How am I going to do it, I wonder? And this is what I mean. So again, a straight line no more. We get the ruler. You can see now that I've achieved this sort of 4 centimeters or so of depth, as opposed to being this more or less straight line. And again, this is now a fixed shape. So the bias cut of the fabric has allowed enough flexibility for me to mold basically the fabrics, these pieces, into this shape, which they now have. I could remold them if I wanted to, but as long as I don't do anything further, that's how they're going to stay. And yeah, that's just the brilliance of it. It means that it can curl around my neck in the manner it needs to in that one direction, I guess, along the sort of horizontal plane, before then sloping down across the front of my chest into the lapel. So it's just, yeah, it's just going to have that nice, almost like Mobius strip style structure, where it's kind of curving in two directions at once. And yeah, it's just brilliant. It's genius. Let's have a little bit of a tidy up here. I always end up with these scraps in my pocket for like 2 weeks. Bit of a nightmare. It's coming undone now. So if I open this back up, you'll see what I've meant. There you go. Just need to press these edges back out again, and then I think that shape will be a bit more recognizable. And here we are. Just press those out a little bit, and you can see now that's kind of a bit more like something that's going to curve around the neck and angle down while angling around at the same time. Bellissimo. Yep, as with the wedding suit, there was a slight drama with the shoulders and how that affects the collar and whatnot, partly because of a modification I'd made to slightly improve the balance. But yeah, I've ended up basically letting out the neckline by more or less a couple of centimeters, actually, getting rid of these persistent shoulder creases, which will show up if your neckline is too tight. Should be nice and comfortable, and I am constructing this collar with confidence, unlike last time. Away you come. I don't know if it's remotely worth me trying to show you this. This is like some of the most minuscule microscopic sewing, black on brown, etc. But I think maybe you can see those little cross stitches there. Let's just fast forward ahead, shall we? Oof, okay, well, that's that done. So the collar is now sort of more or less officially attached. I should say the under collar is officially attached. Time to get the top collar done. Instantly, you can also see there, I lowered the, well, you can't really see, but I lowered the line of the neckline at the back to sort of get rid of some of that rippling, if you remember from the basted fitting episode a couple of weeks back. off. Right, so this is the base piece for the garment fabric top collar. I'm also going to do a little bit of stretching here, although this is cut on the straight grain, this is just cut normally. But yeah, you'll see what I mean, hopefully, if I can achieve it in just a second. There you have it. Those little wriggles there on the top and the bottom, I've just stretched out using the iron again, and that's just going to allow a nice bit of ease for all the bending and curving that this needs to do in covering the undercollar. Then I'll keep doing that. Incidentally, another sewing recommendation, fabric shears, don't keep them on the corner of your table, right where your elbow is, right above your laptop, because you will slip, you will knock them off, and you will crack your screen. Bad idea. Yeah, I was actually quite surprised how far along I got over the intervening days, sort of evenings and weekend, doing a bit of catch up on this. Again, to call back to the theme last time of being pleasantly surprised that, you know, having been around the block a few times, things sort of fall into place a little bit more intuitively, and the headaches that do persist are ones to do with fit. Yeah, I mean, I still feel like the armhole, the chest fullness is not correct with this jacket. I need to return to the pattern and learn and understand the ways I can implement that. Got to work on that. But overall, touch wood, this is going relatively smoothly, unless you count technological damages. Yoink. And for anyone who's perhaps considering embracing this as their own sort of a long-term hobby, I can promise you, it's not remotely begun to get boring yet. There are always surprises down the way, always things you can improve on. The last time, oh my goodness. Always new degrees of bluntness that your shears can attain. Do behave. Ugh. Now, I've talked a lot, not only over the last few weeks, but over, well, I guess the whole time I've had this channel, about certain steps that are my favourite, certain steps that, you know, like setting the sleeves sort of rather make me feel a little bit weak-bladdered. But I want to talk about this one because I cannot put my finger on it. This is just the most, well, it's not that it's insignificant, but it's just the most understated step where you're basically, okay, you have the seam allowance here of the outer edge, the top edge of the top collar, the bit that is going to run along the back of your neckline once the collar is worn and folded over. And all you're doing here is just basting up under the seam allowance so that it's creating this nice little ridge here between the melt and underneath. And I cannot put my finger on it. The pleasure this gives me, even more so than any other random little basting stage, even more so than actually slip stitching it eventually, which I think I'm not going to bother to do today because I'm lazy. I just, it's too much. It's honestly too much. It's just something about the sort of the ease of manipulating it around by hand, creating this nice little conjunction of rounded edges, the folded under seam allowance, just getting rid of it, seeing it off. It's just nothing to say. I'm sorry, I think I need a moment. I think it's because maybe the raw edge of the melt and it already is its own kind of finished edge. It's hard to explain. It's impossible to explain. The words fail me. Anyway, one of these days, if I'm not careful, I'm going to base my way onto a higher spiritual plane. Okay, scratch that. This is the stitch. Oh yeah, this is the good stuff. This is folding under the top of the collar. Then I'm going to ladder stitch that there later. Just a beautiful feeling, absolutely sublime, incomparable. Okay, you know what, scratch that. This is, no, I'm kidding. Although I do love a little diagonal baste. Yeah, this one is looking slightly less chaotic than the wedding suit one, which, goodness, after all the mark stitching and different permutations of where the neckline was going to be, became a real sight for sore eyes. This is relatively orderly, still not quite as pristine as I was dreaming at the beginning of the project. I'm not a greedy man. I'll be patient, you know, next time. It's all good. It's all good. Main thing is we get out here alive. No more chips to my laptop screen. I think last time I was doing this, I didn't leave enough allowance actually to do these snips because the lining wouldn't go up far enough, or indeed the top collar wouldn't go far down into the lining enough for them not to be hidden. So again, another victory achieved here, although I don't really know what I've done differently this time to guarantee it. Maybe it's all those oxen that I sacrificed to the sewing gods. No animals were harmed in the making of this recording, other than myself. Notwithstanding the drama of me almost destroying my laptop, on which essentially all of my life's pursuits depend, including this one. This has been a rather uneventful day, and actually I think it's probably drawing to a close quicker than I'd thought. I think I might have comically underestimated how little there is to do, but also how long it takes to do it, so this might end up being quite a short episode this week. Deal with it. What can I say? No, I'm joking. My apologies if that's your perception. Still, guess these things take as long as they take. Yeah, I mean, if you have any questions or anything about this construction, maybe something you don't know how to do yourself, or something that seems weird about the way I've done it, please let me know in the comments. And of course, if you've enjoyed the video, please like it. And if you're new to the channel and you want more, feel free to subscribe. Oh boy, yeah. These heatwave weeks, it's just hard to get anything done really, isn't it? What can I say? You all know what's coming next. It's time to set those sleeves. Let's see if I can improve on last time's showing, eh? I'm hopeful. I've tweaked my pattern a little bit. Anyway, let's have a look at this. Well, there you have it. Collar fully attached, well, basted in place. I'm going to do all the finishing stitches, I think, sat mind-numbed in front of the TV at at some point. Yeah, like I say, next week we'll be onto the sleeves, specifically the setting of them. Famously a rather troubled process in my personal past as a amateur tailor. But I have good feelings about this one, and you know, let's not cry over spilt milk before I've spilt it. I've tested out the pattern, I've reduced the size of the sleeve cap slightly so it won't be quite so nightmarishly difficult to distribute the ease around the armhole, but I won't spoil it for now. Let's talk about that next week. Catch you on the flip. Tensions are running pretty high, aren't they? Because we know what these are and we know what has to happen to them. Or maybe you don't, in which case, buckle up. Still a little bit of construction to do, so we'll get that out of the way first. But yes, these are sleeves, or rather this is one sleeve. These are the constituent parts of one sleeve, the lining and the main sleeve. It's going to be set into the jacket. Hopefully my nerve won't waver and I'll have a successfully sleevey jacket by the end of the day. Or, you know, by the end of whenever I do the second one. For those of you not aware, the way that a suit jacket sleeves are attached to the armhole is a little bit more nuanced than just basically, you know, the way you would sew a normal seam, put the right sides together and then you sew and then that's that and everything lines up perfectly. No, instead the cap of the sleeve here is longer than the armhole, and so you have to, by hand, in my case at least, distribute that excess, around the length of the armhole in order to get it to fit. And there are good reasons for doing it this way. The reason is that then allows you to have that excess at the top of the sleeve itself, so beyond the seam, you know, just gives you more comfort and all those things. But the upshot is that it's quite fiddly to do, and Lord knows, I've had a rough enough time of it in the past, as this video can attest. Yeah, I never said I wasn't prone to a little bit of self-pity. I just put these together and spent about the last 2 minutes under the impression that I'd actually made 2 right-hand sleeves, making this one defunct. Thankfully not, so we can carry on. Aren't we lucky? Not to sound like the broken record that I undeniably am, but if you do want a tutorial on how indeed to construct these sleeves from scratch, you can find that here. And indeed, if you want a tutorial of sorts, combined with a rather tragic frontline report of how to set them as well, then you can refer to the video that I linked a short while ago. I just hope you appreciate the psychological effort that was involved, the moral bravery, if you like, the integrity to refer people back to a video in which I experienced so much pain as that sleeve one. Like and subscribe for more fantastical deeds of the human spirit, I suppose. These are fun stitches here. These are, well, you know, I'm doing it with basting thread and they look pretty loose, don't they? But they are going to stay in the jacket. These are just essentially sewing the seam allowances of both the actual sleeve and the sleeve lining pieces together, just to allow them to have a little bit more unity basically, and not just be two overly disconnected floating pieces that are attached obviously down at the bottom at the cuff, but then say at the top at the sleeve and the armhole, just to give them a little bit more coherence, cohesion, cooperation, communion, community, collaborative spirit. I don't know, use your own thesaurus. They are beautiful things really, aren't they, these sleeves? Again, not my sleeves, sleeves in general. Nice elegant curve, and then yeah, if we really can nail the cuff vent, which again is another thing that I've never really quite managed to work out. I've done the practice one on the other sleeve, and I think, although this is what I thought the last time, I think I might have cracked it. So let's see if after all on attempt, I don't know, 2 sleeves of jacket, attempt 8 doing this, I've actually worked it out. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Okie dokie. Now for the old switcheroo. I think I need to find a catchphrase for moments like this, because I often use "there she blows" whenever I've completed something and it's time to move on to the next step, which I'm very fond of. I mean, who couldn't be? I mean, it's slightly different qualities of this, isn't it? It's like the magician's reveal or entering the secret crypt. I don't know what I'm talking about. Open sesame, maybe? Any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. Alrighty-o. Oh, I could take a little nap on this, but I won't, at least not yet. Just gonna trim away some of the excess length on the lining hem here, because it's just gonna get in the way. That's one thing I both sort of enjoy. What do I mean when I say enjoy? Well, let's start the other way around. It's one of these things I sort of slightly disdain, but also weirdly enjoy about tailoring. It's this, it's not fair to say it's wasteful. You're kind of instructed to cut a piece at certain dimensions, maybe because, okay, you're cutting a lining piece that's based off the actual garment piece pattern, and as I've discussed, you will then just chalk on basically the added excess that the lining pieces need to have. And yeah, but there'll be points where it's like, yeah, cut it out this way, and then later on just like trim away a load of it, and that's just, you know, that's just a scrap. Anyway, I'll find a use for this, I guess. You can see here already just how tantalizingly this vent is starting to take shape. Ooh, have I already overshot? Gotta say, there's a very cheeky part of me that's been thinking, I mentioned that I do need to have this suit now finished in a couple of weeks' time, which should definitely be fine, but had occurred to me that if, in the very worst case, I don't quite maybe manage to get certain things like the finishing hand stitches and stuff, you know, all your decorative prick stitching and this, that, and t'other done by that date, then maybe I can just leave it sort of basted in internally and no one's really gonna notice. It's between you and me. I suppose technically that if people are happy enough wandering around with their, you know, overcoats and suit jackets basted shut at the vents and, you know, just living their lives like that, it's basically just a version of the same thing, isn't it? I mean, this is the 21st century, right? You can always pass it off as a deliberate style choice. Oh, don't let me down. Come on, come on. Oh, bother. sometimes find myself having to battle the urge to just break into song while filming, not because I want to turn this into a weird hybrid tailoring musical content channel. You know, it's like singing in the shower, isn't it? If I want to start blasting out some Whitney Houston, that is copyright protected, and I would not be allowed to include it in this video, so it's kind of pointless. So maybe I have to learn a sort of repertoire of copyright-free sea shanties or something. Or if any professional tailors watching this, should there be any of you know of any official tailoring approved, industry approved, you know, work songs that you like to sing, I don't know what it would be, Three Blind Mice, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, just let me know and I will do my best to advertise it on the channel with my sonorous tenor voice. Maybe today's not the day anyway. All right then, so apparently the only thing that's blunter than my shears is my chalk. Yeah, this is what I'm gonna kind of aim to do. Trim along this sort of internal square here, so leaving a bit of seam allowance both at the top and on the sides, and then trim a sort of diagonal little, you know, whatever, a little snip in there up to this sort of outer bit, which is basically where everything's gonna fold back. And I'm hoping then that that will achieve the desired neat result that I want, and less like the sort of, how should I say, slightly abhorrent results that I've achieved in the past. So let's see what we can do, shall we? Indeed, let's see what these bad boys can do. Probably not a fat lot. Okie dokie. I mean, I don't need to be quite so precious about it, but why not? And you can see here, this is going to be the nice visible undervent bit that's going to be showing out there. So, okie dokie. Ooh. Then like so, please work. Goodness me, please work. A little bit of wrangling and we'll get there. Let's do the wrangling off camera, shall we? I don't think it's especially interesting. Well wrangled, I'd say, just about. In case you're wondering, in case you happen to have cause or knowledge to wonder, I'm doing a very short vent because, as we know, I'm rather lazy and I'm just doing a single button cuff, which now that I've realized how much fun it is to actually sew buttonholes by hand, I'm going to stop doing in the future. Again, the motivation in this instance is to have this done basically as soon as I can have it done. Don't want to give myself more work than I have time to do necessarily, but yeah, if you imagine basically that if you wanted more buttons, then this would just be taller basically. This would just be longer, the vent part, both on the inside and the outside, and this little feature here would be more like up here, or something like that. So you'd have the room for those extra buttons and buttonholes. Okay, this has worked pretty well. I think we can log this, at least this jacket. That's my first truly, let's say, successful vent experience. Hallelujah, glory be. And back we go now, right ways out. Don't make me say it. But then again, who's gonna stop me? There she blows. Last step now before the setting. You could cut the tension in the air with a knife, and not a sharp one either, but a knife, cheese knife. I don't know, cheese knives are probably quite sharp, aren't they? Oh, shut up. What are you talking about? Well, I can't say there she blows twice in 30 seconds, can I? So I'll spare you that one. But here she is. So for those of you who perhaps don't know what is about to happen, this is which sleeve is this? Yeah, left sleeve. So yeah, it's going in the left armhole, and thus endeth the lesson. So there's three kind of cardinal points really on this sleeve, and indeed on the jacket itself. Have the front pitch point, which I think I've calculated to be correct, and that is matching this little chalk mark here. We have my little top mark here, which is going to go where the shoulder seam is, and then the back seam here on the sleeve is going to match the back seam. No, it's not going to match that. It's going to match this back pitch point, sorry, on the back of the armhole there. So the first thing I'm going to do is just match the front pitch point and sew, or baste rather, pretty firmly, nothing special going on, just around this sort of like 6, 7, 8 centimeter range here at the bottom of the armhole. I'm not above using a few pins to get my bearings either, and nor should you be. Ugh. So that's pitch point number 1. Lined up. I think I'm just going to pin the others. Yeah, so instantly I'm only sewing through the garment fabric itself and not any of the other stuff. And I'm glad I took the trouble to remark upon that, because it means I realised I'd forgotten a certain step, which is to reinforce the armhole with this little semi-bias iron-worked into a curved strip of pocketing here. But I'll do that. You don't want to be bored by all that nonsense. So after a little more time than I care to admit, those 3 cardinal points are now in place, the armhole is properly reinforced, and so we're going to turn the whole thing inside out. And what's going to happen is basically the excess that is in the sleeve cap, sorry, this is not especially cinematic, so let's arrange this in a slightly more spectacular fashion, shall we? So whether that really has achieved the desired goal or not. I have the sleeve head popping up through the armhole here. I have these little waves of excess here where the head is longer than the armhole that it needs to fit into, and I'm just going to hand stitch that, hand baste it in a certain position so that all that excess is distributed in small individual ripples of just, you know, the small stitches I'm going to take. I'm just sort of back stitching in this odd way, and this is my technique. You're actually meant to do 2 rows of individual stitches, but yeah, I'm pushing along these little bubbles of excess, as you can see, to sort of catch, then I'm piercing that in the middle, coming forward, arranging the next bubble to await me, as it were. Goodness me, come on, behave. Like so, and then, yeah, coming back. And in this way, trying to evenly, and within these relatively small stitches, spread all that extra fabric around the entire seam. And then I'm going to press it away with the iron And yeah, I have reduced the relative size of the sleeve cap to the armhole to be about 5 centimeters, which is normal and recommended, compared to the last time where it was more like 6 or 7, which is why I had so much trouble. This is not exactly what you would call absolute cinema, so I think we'll just try and skip to the end result. I think it's going okay. I can already notice though just how much less excess there is to handle, which is both good and slightly bad insofar as I think I maybe overshot it at some points, you know, in the sort of trauma response, I suppose, to how much there was to deal with last time. But anyway, like I say, let's skip to the end, shall we? I don't know if you can even really see anything that's going on. Not sure if I can either. Yeah, I think we just about got there. Yeah, that was way less of a headache than the last time around. Although, I mean, yeah, look, you can see it's still not quite perfect, but I think this is in the territory of will get pressed away by ripples and then dealt with a little bit by the sleeve head. Should do it like this every time. Not bad. Not bad at all. Maybe you disagree, who knows? And this instead is what I was talking about with my armhole scooping. As you can see there, that's barely an inch basically, just maybe 3 centimeters between what will eventually be the actual stitch line of this and the edge of the pocket itself. Not really as much as you'd like, but you know, we'll live and die by it. Let's go give this a press and see how it looks then. All right, done that. It's one of those things where sometimes I'm never actually sure if any of these things are actually functioning or not, but I think that's a respectable enough sleeve. I think again, get a sleeve head in there, be a bit careful while doing the machine stitch not to catch any puckers, and all should be well. But then we said that last time, didn't we? And look how that turned out. Oh, sweet friend, don't let me down. Not that you ever do. Heart's in my throat, folks. Heart is in my throat. Operation Pucker Watch is pretty intensive work, I'll tell you that much for free. Ugh. Maybe I just have to start exclusively doing that Italian thing where you just purposely pucker it and have no sleeve head. I'll be a genius at that particular art. Let's see, shall we? Get rid of all this basting first. Oof. Yeah, I usually end up getting a load of basting stuck in the actual stitch line, but I tried to be careful about that too this time. It was a special treat to myself. Goodness gracious me, here we are. Alrighty then. Yeah, I think that's worked out pretty swimmingly actually. Stitch line is relatively straight, not always a given with me. And, you know, there's maybe the slightest hint of a pucker there, but I'm not going to care about that. Maybe that can even be pressed away from the outside, and yeah, I guess I keep saying, once the sleeve head's in, all will be fine and dandy. I trust. Yeah, sleeve heads do a lot of heavy lifting in my practice, so to speak. Oh yeah, well, I mean, look at the porcos. They are doing as I feel. Yeah, I think I'm going to go and, I don't know, drink a pint of champagne or else warm milk and generally toast to my success here. Au revoir. Well, here we are at the end of another suit project and, well, like the last time, I have a bit of a confession to make. Now, evidently, it's not that I have already made the trousers. Please see Exhibit A, though I guess there is a sense in which you could say that I have made this suit before. Whee! Oh no. Oh, lol. Whee! And probably 99.8% of you are just here to learn about tailoring or, I don't know. To be honest, I can't really understand why anyone will watch this. But at least a few of you are, I assume, and for those of you who aren't, and more particularly for those of you who have, this revelation might seem to have ramifications for the, how should I say, integrity of the channel. Although I hope not. You know, I think I've been reasonable. Anyway, let's not beat around the bush too much. The secret is this. This suit that I'm sewing now, and not the one that I sewed in my Sewing My Wedding Suit series, is actually going to be my wedding suit. Scandalous. Scandalous. Oh, let's be careful now. Ooh. So yeah, when I was sewing the original wedding suit, that was what, winter? And we were originally eyeing up an early spring date, which is to say, a date on which one would be well served by a relatively warm, properly constructed, heavy fabricked, heavy lined, whatever, suit thing to wear. As it happened, we ended up getting a date in the heart of summer, which, you know, where I live can either be, you know, wet and windy, or it can be extremely hot. So I thought, well, not only have I got all this extra time that I didn't think I was gonna have, but I also don't necessarily want to be stood there in my black bamboo with sort of polyester lining suit jacket on what could potentially be a sort of 35-degree day. So that's why I thought of linen. That's why we are doing this. So obviously I figured I couldn't just do another series sewing my wedding suit. I mean, you know, for goodness sake, where would it end? People would think I was some sort of classic Hollywood 8 times divorcee Kirk Douglas style figure, and I wouldn't want that, would I? Certainly wouldn't want that. Holy moly. I mean, he's dead. And so, you know, I just thought maybe it'd be the, well, A, the more honest thing to do, oops, and B, maybe a little bit more intriguing somehow, to just, you know, get on and make it and then give the big reveal at the end, namely right now. Possibly this isn't the great mystery that I hoped it would be. You know, I thought maybe it could be a little bit of Agatha Christie style fun for us all. Yeah, in case you haven't already guessed, the event that I keep saying I need to get the suit ready for is indeed, in fact, my own wedding once more. So look, you know, I hope you can forgive me, and indeed forgive the hurry that I keep saying I'm in over the last few weeks, which is, you know, indeed true, the case, blah, blah, blah. all that jazz. But enough of that for now. Look at these trousers, look at these pockets. Aren't they nice? Are they nice? I don't know. We're about to find out. Overall, I'm feeling very good about this suit. I've had the jacket, the still semi-completed jacket, hanging up on the outside of my wardrobe. And I've got to say, I do always enjoy doing that when it's in the sort of final stages of construction. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, what on earth is that? You're absolutely terrified, and then you remember, oh yeah, it's just my latest amateur tailoring masterpiece, just chilling out with my sleep paralysis demon. I mean, I've talked before about how attractive I find it when the basting stitches are still in. And you know, especially when I've only put one sleeve in as well, that really adds a touch of sort of you know, Frankensteinism to it. Yep, as ever, as I always say, as long as each one can be a little improvement on the last, I'll be happy. And I think that's where we're at. Although who knows how these trousers are going to pan out, I guess. That's what we're looking at. Respectable, respectable. There's stuff that goes on here at the very corner that I often get a little bit confused by. I think there's some instruction in my special book about, you know, keeping one thing or another out of the way of the other, and I just prefer, I think, to catch it all in the side seam. The cheap ways are the best ways sometimes, aren't they? I'm really hoping against hope, that these pleats work this time properly. I mean, again, those last trousers from the I Love Sewing Trousers episode, I feel like they were more or less there. There were a few things I changed. I'm gonna have to try and remember what I changed about the pattern, actually. I'll think about it and get back to you. Yeah, I guess whatever changes I have made are the ones I said I was gonna make at the end of that trouser episode. You would think, wouldn't you? So anyway, without going back to that video to check what it was exactly I said I was going to do, I'm pretty sure it was just lengthen the seat seam by another, maybe it was a centimetre or so. And then I think also the crotch, lengthen the crotch, change the shape of it slightly. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and then also, most interestingly, I followed the advice that a nice forthcoming viewer offered. I'm sorry, I haven't got the name to hand. But if you remember that it was you, please do shout yourself out. About making sure that the grain line was properly oriented with relation to my waist and so on, because their suggestion was that part of why, for instance, the pleats were pulling open was that the grain line was actually sort of angling outwards towards the sort of outside of my leg, and obviously you'd want it to be going directly down. And to do that, I modified the closeness basically of the stance. So yeah, it's to do with the wideness or otherwise of my stance. And certainly from my thighs, I actually have quite a close stance. So my thighs actually sort of basically go inwards. As I've said, I'm kind of knock-kneed. So my thighs immediately go inwards and then they sort of straighten out a little bit at the knees. My legs do, that is. And so yeah, so I just, I'd already made a modification for that purpose when I made this pattern, but I just sort of made it even more extreme. So basically had, if you imagine, from going out here, if the leg was going down there, I basically just changed the angle to come inwards a little bit like that. And I'm hoping that all of these tweaks will, you know, at least have some of the desired effect in, among other things, getting rid of the pulling open pleats and just generally cleaning up the way the trousers are hanging. Yeah, this incidentally is a fun version of the pipe pocket. As those of you may know who've made pipe pockets before, there's this bit where you have to snip the prongs. And it's quite difficult because you have to snip, I think with the classic pipe pockets, you know, you want to snip the garment fabric layer, but not, for heaven's sake, not the piping layer. In this case, you actually don't need to worry about that. I can't remember why. If I think of it later, I'll let you know. But what's fun about it is I remember making this the first time and was like, don't you need some sort of like pocketing layer to reinforce it on the other side? And then I realized the point is you're using the pocket bag, one of the pocket bags, as essentially the reinforcement layer. I was being a little bit of a so-and-so last week, you could say, implying that tailoring is a sort of mildly wasteful practice at some point, which is definitely not fair. This is an excellent example of why the opposite is true. It is fun, the idea of having your own videos that you've made for, you know, other people's benefit as your own little like memory aid. Yeah, the other day I was thinking maybe I'll make myself another shirt. Then I thought, can I remember how to do that? And then I remembered, it doesn't matter if I remember because I put it on video. So I can just get that video up side by side with yours truly. And yeah, test the wisdom of my own instructions, which perhaps I'd rather not do. Might be a bit too much to bear. Never gets any easier, does it? Yeah, so rather than having two separate piping pieces, you just have this one piece that serves to be the piping on both sides. Obviously I haven't pressed this yet and possibly I've not snipped it enough either, so give it a few goes. Yeah, okay, so I've pressed that now and I'm just gonna take this because I do not have the guts to snip any further in there. I can't even see the stitch anymore on the other side, so I feel as if I'm within 0.5 millimetre anyway. I don't really understand why it's still looking like that. I'm just gonna live with it. But yeah, you can kind of see that's just a one piece. That's going to now become the facing to this pocket bag and there's going to be another one that goes up there. But that's by the by. You know, honestly, when I think of the days in my life that I anticipate to be amongst the most beautiful, obviously, you know, my upcoming wedding day, that's going to be a big one. Perhaps winning some sort of honorary Oscar for services to cinematic tailoring, something like that. But I really think number one is going to be when I finally get a trouser made that truly fits. Holy moly. That truly will be what they call in the industry a ripper. I'm aware that I've not yet done a tutorial either on how to make this type of pocket or indeed how to make trousers themselves, just other funny little videos. I definitely intend to do that relatively soon, although I think there might be a little bit of a quiet period over the next month for me for reasons you can probably guess at. As you know, I'm very fond of trousers and I never mind an excuse to have to make a pair. So I guess watch this space is what I'm trying to say. But I'll try and give you a little sneak preview of one of the nightmares to come. I need to sew these two pocket bags together. They need to be first sewn together, what's the word, wrong sides facing, because I'm going to do a French seam, so you know, I'm then going to turn it inside out. But obviously the wrong side of this pocket is here, and the wrong side of this pocket is here. We have this massive trouser leg in between, and there is a way of sort of pulling the trouser leg through the pocket opening, but I just got to try and remember how to do it. I think I literally just described it. Pocket bag through the trouser is probably slightly more intuitive. Hang on, what are we doing here? Oh, this does not feel good. I don't need this in my life right now, come on. There's enough on my plate as it is. Like that, is that it? That looks kind of like it. And then yeah, so wrong sides facing, stitch around there, bish bash bosh. All being well, Bob will be, and indeed remain, my uncle. I'll make sure to get this right before I do that tutorial, I promise. I think my needle might be on the brink. Serve me well. Yeah, when do you guys change your needles? Are you like run it down to the bitter end, literally till it breaks kind of thing? Or as soon as you hear the slightest hint of dysfunction, do you know, get it out of there, send it to needle retirement home? Let me know in the old comments. Oy, let's see if I got this right, eh? Ooh. Okay, looking promising. Okay, yeah, so you can see now that that pocket bag is kind of fully turned around. Everything's looking, well, dandy enough. As you may know, with French seams, it's now time to essentially top stitch again around here and trap those seam allowances in the, the inside of this fresh seam. What fun. Okay, so there you go. Almost done, except I need to top stitch in the ditch, which I've already done stupidly ahead of time along the top there to lock that pocket in. And then, I've already said Bob's my uncle, can't I? Wait, what did someone put in the comments? What was it? Bingo, bango, bongo? Something like that? Yeah, bingo, bango, bongo. It's not bingo, bango, bongo. Let me have a look. It is bingo, bango, bongo. Thank you, Mike. Well, not yet. There'll be a bingo, a bango, and a bongo in due course. Bingo, bango, bongo. That was a lot of fun. I'm keeping that one. You know, people always say how hard fly zippers are, and it is true, but they always act as if the hardest thing is getting the zipper on itself in a lined up way, and they are actually technically correct. But I always find that the hardest thing is working out which side you need to be on your left side and your right side, as in the left side of your fly and the right hand side of your fly, left hand side of your fly, right hand side of your fly. Your left or my left, who cares? And then obviously you have that way that corresponds to the right and the wrong sides of the fabric. Which way around you need to sew things in order that, for instance, this piece, which is going on the inside of the right fly, is the right way around when it comes out. Thankfully, I happen to have guessed right. In fact, it wasn't even that I guessed right, I just did it forgetting that I needed to guess, that I needed to work it out, and the gods have smiled upon me in this instance. But yeah, fly zippers, don't even bother. Nah, just kidding, they're fine. Did I get this right? Yeah, I got that right. Yeah, so here begins the first of many strange switcheroos of zip fly making, fly zipper making. Got about 4 different layers here that are all got to be sandwiched on top of each other, then all turned inside out after a fashion. Yeah, it's funny, I've sometimes espoused, at least to myself, that trouser making is a day's work, which I think is definitely true, but trouser making while filming the trouser making with various hilarious asides, oh dear me. That is a slightly more time-consuming endeavour. I'm not sure I'm going to get much further than the fly zipper today. So it might be that this is the last episode of actual construction. Obviously I will do an episode at some point exposing, if you like, the fully completed garment. Fully completed suit, I should say. And I'm sure you'll be awaiting that with bated breath. Jeez Louise, it's getting dark in here. But yeah, I'm extremely excited to showcase this suit. Again, I have high hopes for the trousers. I have even high hopes for the jacket. I think the jacket is turning out pretty well fit-wise. Although again, I think it's sort of become quite a, well, not skin tight, but a relatively easeless situation. And I'm definitely gonna look into how to add a bit more drape basically, both in the chest and in the back going forward. At least I found my zipper foot, which had gone walkabout. Ho, ho, ho. What was I saying about high hopes? What was I saying about the sewing god smiling upon me? Does anyone see the problem here? Zips on backwards. No stitch unpicked, eh? No stitch unpicked. Oh, what happened there? Whose idea was that? Oh, right. Although I've got a horrible feeling I've just done the same thing again. But we'll see. We'll see. Oh, I hate zips. I hate zips so much. Please don't say I'm now sewing in the zip as well. It's possible. It's eminently possible that is what I've done. But we'll see, won't we? Come on, let's try and get out of harm's way. Can't wait to do a tutorial on this. Share my wisdom. Yeah, I absolutely sewed too close to the zip, so I've had to reinsert again for a 3rd time, but at least the zip was already in the correct position, so all I have to do is unpick yet another tiny row of stitches. So let's do that. My word. If I were feeling spiteful, I'd make you watch it, but I'm not, so I won't. Something like that. Almost. So it goes. Oh, dear me, yeah. Might have to do a few practice runs before that tutorial. Suppose 11th time's a charm, eh? Doing the other side now, which is slightly less nerve-wracking, and yeah, I think the fly zipper is gonna have to be my last act today. Oy, for goodness sake, I don't know why I keep taking the machine down and instantly needing to use it again. I'll be back on the scene in, I guess, a couple of weeks, and I'll be showcasing how this bad boy turned out. Did I do wrong size to right size or something? Nope, nothing so egregious as that. Okie dokie, we're getting somewhere, I think. So yes, I thank you once again for your patience with me, for your forgiveness, which I hope is forthcoming of my deceitful ways. I like to think the stakes could hardly be lower, but I understand. No one really likes getting the wool pulled over their eyes. Hang on. Something's not right here, is it? I need to call it a day. Second suit of the year. Who do I think I am? Well, it's been a very pleasant few weeks, enjoying the height of summer with my newlywed wife. Time, of course, that I could have spent instead on camera, admiring my own handiwork, but better late than never. That's what this video is for. And if you'll permit me a measure of smugness, this has turned out pretty well. Now, I know I say it at the end of basically every project, and at some point I'm going to have to be a little bit more specific about what I mean by turned out pretty well. So I guess allow me to mention a few of the specifics. Focusing on the jacket to start with, the fit is good. I like it, it's snug, and still more or less all the mobility I could wish for. You may remember from a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember exactly which episode of this series, but I was concerned a little bit about the balance, which I fixed by sort of angling the front panels up into the shoulder seam a little bit. I will be fixing that properly on the pattern by slightly different means. Again, means which I did cover in, I think, basically my very first video, which you can find here, just in case you have your own jacket pattern that you want to make a few tweaks to. But never mind that now. Today, we're talking about me. The shoulder lining you can see also sitting here is a touch too wide. That's a very easy fix, you know, just taper it in. But you can kind of see here and over there that there's this weird little pinching effect that's happening at the top of the sleeve. Not mad about it. In fact, as you can see with the basting here, I actually have yet to properly close the sleeve lining. So if I really wanted to, I could kind of undo it all, take out the sleeve head, and basically just do that as a modification directly on this jacket. Let's see if I really have the integrity to do that. I'm a little suspicious. As I did grumble again in an earlier episode, don't quite remember which, I had scooped in the chest semi-dramatically to the point where I was a little bit concerned about the armhole encroaching quite deep into the chest and getting a bit too near to the breast welt pocket there. It's turned out fine, and it's not like with an earlier jacket, the one I made, this Japanese yarn-dyed cotton fabric one, where I really scooped it in quite dramatically, and you can notice it, I think, when I'm sort of spreading my arms open like that. No, in this case, it's still within the realms of acceptability, I think. But going forward with the pattern, I want to keep the shape of the armhole, I want to keep the width of it, and I also want to keep the actual snugness or the fittedness of the chest around my chest, but I do want a little bit more chest ease, basically, and also a little bit around the back over the shoulder blades. And I think I've slowly worked out, it's not like by divine inspiration or something. I've just done a little bit of Googling, and I think I've understood what I need to do to the pattern to implement that, further increase the already considerable comfort of this jacket fit. And yeah, it'll just be one step closer to the final product. The trousers are also a step forward, although still a little bit imperfect, and I would say more markedly so than the jacket. First thing I noticed when I first tried them on was that I had forgotten to check this. So what is this? That's the front panel of my pattern, this is the back panel. And if I put them together like this to show you how the inseam basically meets, oh my goodness, this is a bit complicated. Kind of ends up being this little divot, this little sort of inverted intrusion, if you like, into the crotch area. So instead of it being a nice curved crotch shape like that, there's this little bump that went in. That was fine, I just had to sort of freestyle a new crotch line basically from front to back, and that's easy to fix on the pattern as well. But as you can see with the pleats, which are still pulling open a little bit, and as I can certainly feel when I'm wearing the trousers, the crotch is still lacking perhaps just that slightest bit of length. And overall, I don't think the shape of the crotch and just everything going on around the hips is correct just yet. But again, with the pleats being the canary down the mine, it is still better than that last trouser I made. And it is certainly much better than the first wedding suit trousers that I made. And narrowing the angle of the stance as well, which I discussed, I think, in the last episode, has certainly helped as well. Definitely, I think they just fall more in alignment with the actual shape of my leg. And again, that too has helped make sure that the grain line of the fabric itself, once the pattern pieces have been cut, goes down in the correct direction to help everything just drape properly. I also gave myself just a couple of centimeters more breathing room in the waistband. Again, with the last trousers, I was really asking for trouble, you know, really pushing the limits of my deludedness as far as my weight loss was concerned. But here it's just right, it's snug and comfy, but also fixed, and there's no sense of tightness or constriction whatsoever, which again, having the flattest bum in the universe is very important for me. Now, this really was ultimately still a fit-based project. Again, the idea, the goal, well, obviously was to end up with a nice garment, but going forward, to practice basically just nailing the pattern. And I wasn't trying to rock the boat as far as what I'd done on last project was concerned with things like the finishing and whatnot. Usual stuff, just a bit of prick stitching around the edges, handmade buttonholes, which again are slightly more respectable than last time, but still need a bit of practice. One again on each cuff, because I'm lazy. Otherwise, I think I mentioned recently, I'm gonna stop doing that because I actually really love doing the buttonholes, and I also need to practice. So I think on the next jacket, I'll do the usual 3 or 4. But yeah, I'd love to know what you think, obviously. I'm also not really sure what the next project's going to be. I've got a couple of other things that are going to be keeping me busy over the back end of the summer, so I don't think I'll be able to be sewing as much and indeed posting videos as often. Though Lord knows I need my fun as well. But yeah, if there's anything you'd be curious to see me try and sew, or any tailoring related projects that you'd like to suggest, perhaps anything you think that I would find interesting or would enjoy learning how to make, let me know. I make no promises as to whether I'll take up any of these suggestions, but let's stir the pot a little bit, shall we? Anyway, here's to the institution of marriage.